Chapter 11:18. No, I just wanted to ask about Rui 1. But now you've changed the topic. Luonan wasn't sure if Blood Demon had truly misunderstood, or if it was intentional. At a time like this, listening more and talking less was correct, but it was hard to understand without a head or tail. Luonan added vaguely, "You can help me sort out the clues." Blood Demon gladly agreed. "There are some things I need to ponder over. The Deep Blue project has been in development for less than a decade. The related products come one generation after another. The military's similar self-research projects are suppressed to the point where they can't lift their heads. The Bloodline project was established a generation earlier than Deep Blue. Not a single reliable rumor has leaked out, but there are still people madly pouring money into it. As far as I know, similar projects that are unrelated to the Apocalypse Laboratory have received less and less sponsorship in recent years, especially the funding from the top circles of the rich and powerful. Oh my, it's truly a tragic sight. What does this mean?" "It means that your investment has failed." Luonan responded in his mind for the first time, but he remained silent in reality. The Blood Demon didn't have the ability of telepathy. He continued, "Is it because those rich people who have buried their necks in the soil are staking it all on one throw? Do they trust Li Wei that much? Do they trust this highly dangerous fellow of unknown origin? I can believe that one person is retarded, but all of them are retarded. It's better to believe that Li Wei has cast a collective curse on them." Luonan felt that Blood Demon could be a bit more direct. "So, brother, you need to know that Li Wei is a fellow who is very good at persuading people. He is the expert who knows how to fight for research funding. He's on a completely different level than those great hoodwinkers who are used to using PowerPoint to tell stories. He's much better at using facts. At the very least, the salivating prospects that are based on a partial truth to convince people." The Li Wei that Blood Demon spoke of sounded more like the boss of a school. Luonan's lips twitched. "So the results of the Bloodline project have already been placed before those people's eyes. They have obtained approval. Yes, they should have achieved extraordinary success." Luonan's mind suddenly stirred when he said the word extraordinary. A few faintly discernible figures quickly flashed through his mind, but his mouth didn't pause. "If you want to prove your success, you have to do it in a circle that's neither too big nor too small. Success itself needs some fame, but you have to do it discreetly. Most of the time, you have to change your appearance. It's still success, but what they think of as success is different from what we think of as success. In the end, the Bloodline project is a project to study people. Its most convincing results are also people, such as Rui. When Luonan's understanding of the Bloodline project suddenly deepened by a level as he thought back to the matter of the 2000th young miss. That was how it was strung together. No wonder the Blood Demon kept mentioning names, after he suspected that there was a misunderstanding. It was true that only the names that were deeply related to the Bloodline project could prove the real value of the Bloodline project. If he added the keywords that caused the Blood Demon's misunderstanding, Ha City, which famous person in Ha City? Forgive Luonan for his shallow knowledge, but he only knew of one person. Apollyon, the one who was publicly acknowledged as one of the 16 strongest extraordinaries, the one who dominated the new continent, and the one who formed a restrictive contract with the High Lord of the Secret Contract, was actually related to the Bloodline project? In that case, what was the purpose of High Lord's Secret Contract's challenge? The background behind the scenes was much more complicated than what he knew. Luonan couldn't figure it out for a time. Naturally, he had to ask again. But there was no need to mention Apollyon's name at this time. The main thing was that he could feel that the name Blood Demon spoke of was not singular, but plural. So he might as well speak a bit more openly. "Mr. Blood Demon, I'll ask you this. There are less than 100 extraordinaries standing at the apex of the world right now. How many of them are related to the Bloodline project? Or perhaps they were released by the Apocalypse Laboratory." These words lingered in Luonan's chest. Luonan's mind was truly odd when he actually said them. Li Wei's influence on Earth had already reached such a deep level? It was probably because Blood Demon had long since made up his mind. Luonan just laughed out loud when he pointed it out. "From what I'm saying, anyone who is close to the Apocalypse Laboratory and Li Wei is a suspect. There's no need to talk about Wang Yong that day on the ship. It's possible that thousands of miles away, Luonan shook his head slightly when Blood Demon spoke of Tugu. But he didn't interrupt Blood Demon's words. Luonan continued to listen. A bit more extreme. After Li Wei took control of the Deep Blue World and established the Apocalypse Laboratory, any extraordinaries who are close to him are suspects. After all, the extraordinaries have only appeared for 30 years or so from the time they have grown to their current scale. It's not a short time, but it's far too fast when it comes to the level of human evolution. It's so fast that it feels unreal. It would be a bit easier for me to accept if someone was manipulating things from behind. This sort of thinking was really hard to accept, right? Especially when you're an extraordinary. Luonan's eyebrows jumped. This fellow Blood Demon seemed to have a carefree and uninhibited appearance, but his mind was unexpectedly a bit dark. You're quite confident in Li Wei. No. I just hope that you can take things a step further before you go to Ha City. After all, the entire world knows that you're competing with Li Wei. You can't not understand the weight on the other side before you go to the boxing stage, right? Blood Demon spoke in a candid manner. We can be considered to be on the same side right now. I have to do a bit of a reminder. A reminder that Li Wei's energy is beyond imagination? Luonan grew more and more suspicious that Blood Demon's misunderstanding today was intentional. This fellow seemed to have been waiting for such an opportunity. Blood Demon chuckled. Speaking of energy, I've thought of another example. You should know that the situation here isn't too good. Yes, I know. Though Luonan resided in Xia City, he was constantly paying attention to Ha City, the center of the storm of the mutant infection outbreak. He was even secretly drawing portraits of the large quantities of mutant-infected people in the city, establishing a model for the step selection of Phase 2 infected people. Plus, he had gathered all sorts of news and intelligence reports. His understanding of Ha City was no less than anyone else's. You understand the situation of Phase 2 and Phase 3 as well? It's very troublesome. Luonan responded simply. He searched for 2 more keywords: riots. Lack of food. Yeah, lack of food. Blood Demon chuckled. In modern society, words like lack of food, or the more serious term famine, seem to be extremely far away. But in Ha City right now, these words went from pure concepts to gradually becoming reality. Due to the mutant infection being completely out of control, the number of infected people in Ha City increased explosively. There were also large amounts of highly dangerous people who were transforming from Phase 2 to Phase 3. The mutant process of these people was already irreversible. Their primordial genes had collapsed and mutated. They were rapidly transforming in the direction of mutant species. This transformation process was extremely fast, and it involved a mutation on the fleshly plane. It was necessary to absorb large amounts of squandered energy in a short period of time. Such an energy requirement was destined to be impossible to satisfy with 3 normal meals a day. Therefore, the infected in this stage would transform into the craziest of predators. Under the drive of chaotic and manic emotions, they would seize all resources that they could use. Things that could be edible and digestible were included, from ordinary food to other fleshly creatures, including people. In a normal city, the appearance of 1 or 2 infected people like this could lead to a series of bloody cases. And in today's Ha City, there were far more than 1 or 200, or even 1 or 2,000 infected people. Thus, riots, massacres, and even famines emerged as the times required. Mutant conversion was an inefficient energy intake method that relied on probability. It would inevitably lead to a large amount of waste. In addition to the influence of social unrest, Ha City's basic mode of existence as a modern metropolis had nearly completely collapsed. Luonan was recalling and also monitoring Ha City's situation in real time. If Ha City continues to be in this state, the aid will not be able to keep up. It will be hard to avoid a great famine. However, the current situation is more of a temporary phenomenon caused by accidents, right? There was no need for secret intelligence. Right now, a few conservative news channels were reporting over and over again. Ha City's largest cultivation buildings had caught fire and exploded due to the effects of the riots. The energy supply lines were destroyed, and a considerable portion of the food that was about to be harvested and sold on the market was destroyed. This caused the price of food in the city to skyrocket. The citizens were panic-stricken. Bread was hard to find. Let's not discuss lack of food or famine today. Blood Demon chuckled twice. The example I'm looking for is actually the cultivation buildings. Oh. You know that the cultivation buildings were one of the most important foundational supports for several dozen large metropolises to be built after World War III. Right now, the world's population of 10 billion has already recovered to the level it was before World War III. The population of 10 billion before World War III was basically the limit that the world could bear. After World War III, the world's arable land area exploded from 17 million square kilometers to 1.7 million square kilometers. Under these circumstances, the world was able to support the same number of people even though it had shrunk by 90%. That's right. Luonan knew this knowledge since he was in elementary school. The cultivation buildings were undoubtedly the crystallization of the world's agricultural, chemical, and energy technologies that advanced by leaps and bounds. It was also a necessary test point for geography or biology tests. Blood Demon suddenly asked, "What is the essence of the cultivation buildings?" Luonan answered without hesitation, "Energy in exchange for output." Where does energy come from? Fusion reactors. Where does fusion reactors come from? From. Luonan was suddenly stuck. He didn't continue for a time. Blood Demon continued to ask him, unwilling to let him go. Where does fusion reactors come from? Who holds the technology patents? Why is it that before World War III, the practical application of fusion reactors was always 50 years later? Why did this technology suddenly mature after the war when everything was in ruins? It went from practical application to miniaturization in one go? Luonan couldn't answer. Blood Demon still didn't give up. At present, fusion reactors still use magnetic confinement fusion technology. Room temperature superconductors must be used to form an ultra-strong magnetic field. Where does this special, cutting-edge material come from? Okay, where? Luonan asked, knowing the answer. Blood Demon's answer was nothing new. Deep Blue World. Li Wei sighed. Chapter 11:19. This time Luonan just chuckled twice. Blood Demon gave him a few words of explanation. The Deep Blue World has a special mineral deposit that doesn't exist on Earth. The Apocalypse Laboratory calls it progenitor. Its specific properties aren't too clear, but it's said to be a half-energized marvel. It's extremely difficult to harvest. Some intelligence says that it's impossible to do with the current level of technology. Of course, it's hard to say whether or not Li Wei can succeed. Progenitor? Is it the type that the Deep Blue Walkers use as fuel for their backup energy system? Luonan had done in-depth research on the Deep Blue platform. He immediately flipped through the relevant information in his mind. That's progenitor with low purity. To be precise, it's just the impurities of or that have received the energy radiation of progenitor. It's formed through special purification techniques. It can barely be considered a companion or... No, it really can't be considered a companion or... The true companion or is none other than the super strong magnetic field that wraps the progenitor or within, the ghost stone. This is the origin of the superconducting revolution after World War III. The electrical signal that carried Blood Demon's explanation was transformed into sound waves that entered Luonan's ears. It stirred, causing him to let out an extremely faint sigh. The superconducting revolution. TSK. Another pillar of the modern metropolis, the transportation and energy supply network that was like the blood vessels of the human body, as well as the countless basic materials and technical fields, were actually engraved with Li Wei's imprint from the very roots. Li Wei was truly a boss-type fellow. And this was just the part that he had shown to the people. Many people, including Blood Demon, should be able to guess that the core that supported this powerful power far surpassed the level that Earth's current civilization should be able to display. But so far Luonan had not seen any particularly obvious or decisive evidence, be it from the mouth of the Blood Demon, or from the information he had obtained from his own understanding. If given the chance, there would probably be quite a few people in the world who would grab Luonan by the collar and interrogate him. Where in the world did you copy that configuration and superconfiguration theory from? But Li Wei didn't seem to know where to start even if they were to interrogate him. In this regard, he seemed to be a bit more low-key than Luonan. Frankly speaking, this was because of Li Wei's deep foundation on Earth. It was incomparable. This demon from beyond could not be viewed as a simple isolated individual. It was just like in an RPG game. Before seeing the final boss, one would have to struggle through endless levels for a while. Luonan thought for a few seconds. Then he thought about it and finally chuckled. Okay, I get it. Thanks for telling me. Let's talk in detail when we meet later. After thinking about it for a while, he finally chuckled and said, All right, I understand. Thank you for telling me. Let's talk in detail when we meet again. Blood Demon replied, Sure. We'll talk in detail when we meet. The call ended, and Luonan could not help but think a few more things. Li Wei had such a common and close relationship with the extraordinaries of the world. What about the Blood Demon? Blood Demon Demon Luo Demon Demon Blood Demon. Luonan actually didn't feel anything strange at all. He shook his head slightly and strolled through the underground laboratory. This position was merely a few walls away from the independent power station that supplied energy to the entire North Bank gear. With Luonan's perceptual acuity, he was even able to clearly hear the humming roar of the operation of the energy furnace. Luonan's thoughts drifted a bit when he heard this voice. He still remembered that he had borrowed the power station's reserve energy to discover some of the secrets of the external neuron. Now that he thought about it, there were many details that could be explored. In today's world, all technological devices, at least intelligent electrical devices, had no resistance against the external neuron. Well, it should be said that the dynamo core products that Luonan had seen were in a nearly defenseless state. At first, Luonan treated it as an extraterrestrial higher-level civilization crushing a lower-level civilization. But as he continued to study and research, especially after the experience at the relay station, he gained a deeper understanding of dynamo core technology. All sorts of functions that came from the unknown returned to the plane of reality. Some functional domains of dynamo core technology were more mystical than what Luonan imagined. But some of them still had inherent limitations. They had to conform to basic laws no matter what. For example, the control of electrical devices. If the two structures were completely different, even the lowest level of information coding was different. What control was there to talk about? The reason why dynamo core products were able to do this was because there was no difference in the lowest level. Instead, there was a high degree of convergence. The dynamo core technology that came from the depths of the distant starry sky was completely compatible with the information technology of Earth. Weren't there too many coincidences in the universe? Luonan was more convinced that there was a long and deep fusion going on inside than this kind of imagination. Moreover, the weak side was leaning towards the strong side. It was truly meticulous. Luonan had already walked out of the North Shore jungle while his thoughts were floating. He arrived at the empty campus. Since it was class time, there were very few people on the large campus of Acumen College. The few people he saw were all in a hurry. Most of the students and teachers were arranged according to their classes. They were arranged into classrooms of various sizes. The school had its own rules and regulations to restrict them. Luonan, who had already entered a state of suspension, was a complete anomaly at this time. Of course, there were tens of thousands of students and even teachers in the school. There were many who were impatient with the restrictions of the past. They skipped classes, asked for leave, and were absent from work. Even though some people were in the classroom, their minds were wandering. Some people could even see Luonan strolling leisurely on the campus through the windows. It was unknown how envious they were in their hearts. Of course, they were merely envious of Luonan's freedom. If these people were to know what sort of price they would have to pay in order to have Luonan's current treatment, what sort of pressure they would have to endure, or perhaps they would be restricted by a completely new and unknown set of rules, the vast majority of them would immediately extinguish the thoughts in their hearts. After all, if you had to completely change your current lifestyle habits, even if you had to bet your future as the price, Most people would feel that there was nothing wrong with the present. This was habit and order. Luonan absolutely did not dislike order. He even had a relatively strong inclination towards order. But once he clearly identified the layer of darkness that covered the skeleton that supported this layer of order on the surface, the inner marrow that quietly grew within it, and the genes and cells that were rooted upon it, a heavy pressure spontaneously arose from the bottom of his heart. Vaguely, this pressure seemed to transform into a dense demonic shadow that silently pressed against the back of his head. It could break his flesh and scrape his bones at any time to deal a fatal blow. At this time, the so-called order was quite hateful. Luonan rubbed the back of his head and muttered to himself. In order to maintain the entropy decrease within a system, there must be a channel to handle the entropy increase. That channel? Where is the sewage pipe that conforms to the relevant magnitude? If he wanted to subvert this order, where should he start? June 16, 2097. The third Sunday of June. Influenced by a certain powerful civilization before the Third World War, it was also known as Father's Day. It was basically one of the world's commemorative days of consumerism. This morning, Luonan's family finally broke free from the demonic claws woven by Mrs. Luo Shuqing and the home AI, old Mo. After working overtime for many days, Uncle Mo Haiheng finally had the time to rest. He personally cooked a sumptuous and delicious breakfast for everyone. And today, the entire family was gathered together. Even that idiot Mo Peng actually crawled out of bed before lunch on the weekend. The 6 of them surrounded the table. They weren't pressed by the time of work or school. They spoke one after another, chatting as they ate. They were quite amused. Right now, the main topic at the dining table was Rui 1. Mo Peng gulped down his breakfast in a few gulps and concentrated on gossiping. Last night, someone posted a practice video. Rui 1 didn't participate in the video, but what's the meaning of her repeatedly appearing in the camera? Rui 1 was talking about Rui 1, but Mo Peng's eyes shot a glance at Moya. Mingtang culture is simply leaking air from all sides. Even I wouldn't go to this extent. Is there an end to this hype? Rui 1 didn't respond at all. She just ate in small bites. She looked quiet and delicate, but it also seemed like she was tasting the fresh fragrance of each mouthful of porridge soup. It was unknown what these ordinary foods looked like in the end from the level of her perception. Luonan looked at Rui 1 for a long time. He subconsciously wanted to reach out and rub her head. At this time, Moya leisurely picked up a sesame pancake and tore it open. Since you know it's hype, why are you still wasting time? Can't I pay attention to a beauty? Mo Peng spoke boldly and confidently, but as a result, he was met with a cold glare from Mrs. Luo Shuqing. His momentum immediately fell to the ground and he laughed. I just think you guys are going too far. There are already people in our class who are betting on whether or not Rui 1 will make her debut. I heard that there are people on the internet who are starting a fan club. If this goes on, it won't be easy to clean up the mess. Moya was like Rui 1. She ate the pancake in small bites. It was just that she was the one who made it. She ate the staple food like it was a snack. It won't be easy to clean up the mess. It's convenient for you to earn money. You can have Rui 1 sign it and sell it outside. No, absolutely not. Mo Peng received the unfathomable gazes of his parents at the same time. He nearly peed his pants in fright. He immediately raised his hand and cried out in injustice. I used it myself. I just wanted to ride on the popularity and draw some attention online. I wanted to gain a few more fans. Really? Mrs. Luo Shuqing's expression remained unfriendly. Mo Haiheng dismissed it with a laugh. His gaze turned to Moya. Your company has gone a bit overboard these past 2 days. At first, it could be said that they were protecting him, but now that we've seen the results, they're still unwilling to stop. Who knows what kind of trouble they'll cause in the future? If it's not convenient for you to tell me, I'll talk to them. Moya shrugged. What's so inconvenient about it? They've obviously been blinded by the heat these past 2 days. Speaking up to this point, Moya asked, the demonstration hasn't stopped until now. Does the government have any sincerity? Don't let those old matters cause problems in the end before the mutation infection is messed up. Mo Haiheng shook his head. It's not easy to go through the files. He played the same old trick, casually changing the topic. He looked at Luonan. You're going out today? Luonan grinned. Yeah, I came back before dinner. Chapter 11:20. Not long after Luonan vaguely reported his itinerary, an overseas call came in. It was his former secretary, Inlu. She was currently the vice chairman of the Luonan and his Friends Foundation. She was in charge of the foundation's daily work. Luonan took advantage of this opportunity to leave. Mister, your itinerary remains the same today. Yes, I'll be leaving right away. Luonan turned around and waved to his family. He went upstairs to change his clothes. Mrs. Luo Shuqing confirmed from behind. Are you eating at home tonight? Yes. Luonan responded casually. Inlu spoke at this time. Mister, are you going by yourself? Luonan returned to his room. He adjusted his clothes as he spoke. Of course I'm going by myself. It's the most convenient. Inlu had already called him last night. The reason why she was so concerned was because she was the one who provided the coordinates for Luonan's destination today. It was an abandoned laboratory located northwest of Spring City at the southern end of the Hengduan Mountains. It was also the place where Luonan's mother, Mrs. Bo Qingwen, had died. Luonan wished to go there to offer his sacrifice. This was something he had desired ever since he could remember, but he was unable to do so. Today was Luonan's birthday, and it was also the anniversary of Bo Qingwen's death. He wouldn't delay any longer no matter what. It's like this, mister. Inlu did her best to sense Luonan's emotions. She spoke carefully. I reported to you that I found an informant when I confirmed the coordinates. He worked in the laboratory back then. Today he found me and said that someone hired him to lead the way to the laboratory ruins. It seemed to be for the sake of offering his sacrifice. He asked me if I was one of them. Luonan furrowed his brows. Who's the employer? He's not too sure. He said it was arranged by the boss. Inlu paused for a moment. Seeing that Luonan didn't immediately ask for details, she explained softly. It's been half a year since the end of last year until now. Several groups of people have confirmed the location of the laboratory ruins through him. Right now the pattern has already been set. I know. It's my problem. Luonan had long understood this point. It was nothing more than his radiance during this period of time. People coveted him, wanting to trace back to the source and obtain some benefits. After the series of events with Snake Tongue and Jin Tong, these people didn't dare to come to Xia City. Otherwise, places like the North Bank Gear and the Tree Hole Space would have been sieved several times. They couldn't come to Xia City, so some of them went to the wilderness to search for traces of the Luo family's laboratory. The exposure of the Luo cult and the 70-format laboratory back then might have had a lot to do with Luonan. Right now, both sides had Luonan's telepathic lock onto them, and there were people searching elsewhere. They searched, and they found this place. Luonan laughed and didn't mention it again. He looked at himself in the mirror and went downstairs. He asked Inlu, "Is there anything else?" Indeed, there were. Inlu became more careful with her words. The foundation will send employees to various places and establish offices. Some cities need to submit information, especially the census plan. They can only proceed to the next step after the review. Luonan laughed. Ha City and Shi City are in such a mess. Do you want them? It just so happened that he was walking to the staircase on the first floor. When he heard the keywords Ha City and Shi City, everyone in the family, including Madame Luo Shuqing, looked over. They looked at Luonan's side, white on the inside and black on the outside. His clothes were concise and solemn. They were a bit stunned. Luonan waved his hand at them and quickly left through the living room. Their attitude is very firm. Inlu replied in a low voice. The voices of support are very loud. This matter involved the operation of the Luonan and his Friends Foundation, as well as the direction of the future global census. Luonan had already set the tone on this point. If they wanted to do a census, they would start with Ha City and Shi City, where the contradictions were the sharpest and the most chaotic. It seemed like the contradictions were sharp, but it was actually easier to fish in troubled waters. They could even blur the focus when necessary. But to do all this, They needed the full support of the city administrators. Of course, the most important ones were Apollon and Bat Guru. Putting the latter aside, no matter how difficult it was to deal with Apollon, he had the eye of the secret contract to mediate in the middle. There shouldn't be any major problems. But Luonan had communicated with Blood Demon last time. He had to pay attention to the subtle relationship between Apollon, the Apocalypse Laboratory, and Li Wei. But before Luonan could pay attention, a demonic moth appeared on the other side. The census plan and a series of information could be coarse or fine. The audit could be lenient or strict. This was a common method used by the administration to control people. They didn't need to control people. They could grasp the progress through the plan and understand the substantial progress of the global census. If Ha City and Shi City were like this, then the 86 cities would follow suit. The Foundation wouldn't need to do any work in the future. Luonan wasn't angry when he encountered this matter. From his perspective, it was much better for Ha City to send a demonic moth this early than for the Foundation to toss and turn after it had fully started its work. On the contrary, it had the effect of a warning. Besides, who would really count on the Foundation to do a census? If the spearhead were to be pointed over there, it could be considered as helping to cover up. Thinking about it this way, Luonan felt that there was a tacit understanding between him and Apollon. Do as they ask. There's no need to be anxious. Yes. Also, there's something else. It's about Miss Ruewan. Luonan was already strolling along the community road. He subconsciously turned his head when he heard Ruewan. He felt that Ruewan could hear the sound coming from across the ocean. Inla didn't know Luonan's reaction. She just said, Mingtang Culture's face was vague in this matter. They did a bunch of stupid things. It's because of my improper management. Mingtang Culture was indeed a company invested in by the Castle Financial Group. Inla had taken the initiative to communicate and apologize. But Luonan didn't really care about this. In fact, with the current situation, the first one to be ambiguous was himself. This was because Luonan really didn't understand the abnormal attention and concern Rue when displayed in this public matter. It was hard to make a conclusion on what kind of problem it was. Perhaps this was an opportunity. It could enrich Ruewen's overly monotonous life and help this little girl perfect her basic thinking circuits. It wasn't a bad thing. Of course, this couldn't be built on the foundation of psychological harm. The problem was, could this degree of disturbance really harm Ruewen? Luonan didn't feel that this was a possibility for now. Aside from this, Luonan had an independent train of thought. It was just that it wasn't clear and mature enough. It was still faintly discernible. He needed to sort it out a bit more. Mingtang Culture doesn't matter. Let's wait a bit more. Let's see what happens next. Yes. Inla was most likely more concerned about whether or not Luonan would get angry. She let out a sigh of relief when she saw him play it down. But there were some words that needed to be said. The upper echelons of Mingtang Culture are mostly mediocre people. They aren't suited to have too much autonomy in this matter. If you don't mind, sir, you can use this opportunity to transfer a portion of the shares and the corresponding decision-making power. This will lower the risk to a minimum. Luonan slowly walked out of the community and arrived at the outer road. What do you mean? Inla spoke of the scheme in her mind. Miss Emoya is an insider, and she's also your closest family member. She can hold at least a portion of the shares and have the right to speak on Mingtang Culture's internal decisions. Emoya? I'm afraid she doesn't have the patience. Mr. Mo and Ms. Luo can do it as well. Okay. I'll go talk to them later. Inli's words made it seem like the Castle Financial Group was giving away shares to her. It involved a huge wealth of millions. But it really wasn't much compared to Luonan's close relationship with the Bloodflame Order. The two didn't take this matter too seriously. Inlo only needed to know that Luonan wouldn't refuse. She didn't need to worry about the follow-up. But this didn't mean that Inli's matter was over. She used this opportunity to report to the Bloodflame Order. She followed Luonan's instructions to simulate the progress of the Hellfire Tyrant. Luonan actually had a deeper understanding of this than Inlu. Inlu just used this as a primer to lead to another matter. Recently, The madam has been studying the simulation while she's been in closed-door training. She has some insights and wants to share them with you. Huh? Luo Nan raised his eyebrows. Yin Lu, who was tens of thousands of kilometers away, couldn't follow up with this one sound. This made Luo Nan understand that Yin Lu knew that her words were taboo. Ultimately, the connection between Luo Nan and Madame Halder was deeper than Yin Li's. It was just like how Luo Nan's understanding of the structure of the Blood Soul Temple in the Abyss District was deeper than everyone in the Blood Flame Order put together. She didn't use the direct route, but instead used Yin Lu to deliver the message. She deliberately drifted around. What was she planning? Luo Nan didn't quite understand. He didn't understand and Yin Lu didn't understand either. She only had some guesses. And the more she guessed, the more guilty she felt. So she became more and more cautious around Luo Nan. Most of the things she said before were probably because she sensed Luo Nan's mood. She was afraid that she would bump into the muzzle of a gun. Luo Nan really didn't care about these little thoughts. She was actually willing to speak up for her old master. This courage was quite commendable. Huh? Was there a difference between the old and the new? Luo Nan felt a bit amused by his own subtle thoughts. He was already walking on the street right now, far away from the residential community. It was a weekend morning, and the flow of people was much less than usual. The streets were empty, but he felt the sea breeze, slowly dispelling the dry air of early summer. Continue speaking. Inli's voice grew weaker and weaker. Sir, the madam's meaning is that you just so happen to be going to Spring City. Yes, Spring City. Luo Nan turned his head and looked at the silhouette of the rising sun behind the scale-like clouds behind the tall buildings. He slightly narrowed his eyes and waited for the sun to shift in the clouds. The brightness and obscurity changed. Finally, rays of light filled the void and streaked through the gaps between the buildings. They shone on his body, and his skeleton suddenly turned transparent. He disappeared without a trace in the blind spots of pedestrians and surveillance cameras. But in the next second, all the electrical equipment in the surrounding 100-meter diameter area suddenly short-circuited. The street soon turned into a chaotic mess. Luo Nan felt a bit of what he had created, but he had no way to do it for the time being. He lifted his hand and moved his fleshly body. The distance was quite far, and he didn't have the anchor point of the Horned Demon last time. It was hard to avoid a bit of power leaking out. The smoke and fire were a bit heavy, and it was hard to avoid President Ouyang's reprimand. Luo Nan just turned his head again. He used the position and height of the sun to confirm his current location in the cracked, deathly stillness of the wasteland. At the same time, he spoke to Yin Lu, who had just reconnected with the communication. It's a bit remote. I'll go look for her when I'm done. Chapter 11:21. Luo Nan hung up, and his gaze shifted from the sun to the vast and sparse cloud layer. He continued to ponder. How did it deviate? It was quite far off. The distance between him and his destination was nearly 300 kilometers. Right now he was a bit closer to the satellite city outside of Spring City. Though Luo Nan had intentionally made adjustments to avoid the impact of crossing space and directly colliding with the laboratory ruins, the error was so large that he had no choice but to ponder over it. In his field of vision, the appearance of the sun or the clouds was different from that of an ordinary person. It could be said that it had already broken the scope of common sense that had been transmitted in an orderly fashion over several thousand years of civilization. It had merged into the extremely complex structure of space and time. At this time, the magnetic optical mica was extending its enormous body that seemed to be broken in parts. It roughly enveloped the surface area of the planet, which was over 500 million square kilometers. It was still not satisfied with this. It borrowed the special nature of the Earth's magnetic field to merge its own magnetism into the planet's crust, mantle, and crust. It intersected with the different rotational speeds of the different layers of regions. It felt or attempted to play with the spatial magnetic field of this planet, and it fused with the surrounding distorted structure of space and time. At the same time, it closely followed the impact of the solar wind on the Earth's magnetic field. It mixed with the stream of rays and particles ejected from the polar regions. It naturally changed its nature and flowed deeper into the universe's space. It looked wanton and random, completely disregarding the integrity of its form. Or perhaps, as long as the subtle and profound magnetic structure existed, no matter how it tore and deformed, its essence was still one. As for whether or not its creator and controller could keep up, that was another matter. Of course, the magnetic optical mica had a reserved instinct in its endless process of expansion. Within the range of influence of its magnetic field, the magnetic optical mica used its special perspective to observe everything that existed in this area. It attempted to dismantle and piece them together into a more suitable structure. From Luo Nan's perspective, this could be considered a kind of aesthetic. Well, if he followed the magnetic optical mica's aesthetic taste, the world had a population of over 10 billion people. There were animals, plants, microorganisms, mutants, and other non-living existences that were trillions and trillions of times more numerous than humans. This included water, soil, minerals, and other non-living existences. It could be done slowly, or it could be done in an instant after accumulating enough energy. Every time Luo Nan touched the magnetic optical mica, he would feel a sense of accomplishment, as if he had saved the world. Fortunately, he managed to control this terrifying nature that humans could not understand, and did not let this being that he had created with the potential of a great monarch completely distort all life on Earth, and even the space and time of its existence. The question was, who made this thing? No matter what, it was now under control. At the very least, there were no signs of it starting. Now that he thought about it, the magnetite mica he had encountered at the relay station was extremely powerful and had single-handedly suppressed the Heavenly Yuan Empire's army. However, if one were to look into it carefully, it was probably also restricted by the poisonous environment. Its range of influence was greatly reduced, and it only occupied a single planet. The distortion of space-time environment was also not strong enough. As for the one on Earth, it was still controlled, wasn't it? Luo Nan's mind raced a few times before he found the root of the problem. The problem lay in the restrictions. It was precisely because of his restrictions that the magnetic optical mica was unable to completely mold the space-time environment according to its aesthetic standards. There were certain rules and differences between the space-time of Earth and Earth. When Luo Nan came over, he relied on the cloud energy phantom of the magnetic optical mica that covered the entire world to realize the teleportation and shuttle. He followed the laws of the magnetic optical mica, and this formed a certain deviation from the true environment of Earth's spacetime. Luo Nan's recent experiments had all been conducted in the vicinity of Xia City. Even if there was a deviation, it wouldn't be too obvious. The only time he had done a long-distance teleportation, he had anchored the remains of the horned demon. It didn't have any value as a reference. Sure enough, there was no such thing as a perfect success in the first experiment. It was easy to improve after knowing the problem. Luo Nan already had a plan in mind. If he wanted to borrow the magnetic optical mica's fast tunnel and eliminate the error inside, he would either have to release the nature of the magnetic optical mica and let the Earth's spacetime it covered distort into the way it wished to, or he would have to perform a correction calculation between the magnetic optical mica and the local spacetime. This could be solved with a configuration design. Luo Nan obviously chose the latter. Even if he had to expend a bit more mental energy, it would save him 100 times more energy than when he used the Luo clan's sandwich domain to forcefully break through the barrier between the two worlds and realize the teleportation leap. Then again, sometimes the stupidest method was the most correct method. If he wanted to go a step further in his understanding of spacetime configuration, he could refer to the experience of a senior sovereign rank fantasy breed like the magnetic optical mica, but it wasn't appropriate to borrow it too often. It was better to balance things out. Luo Nan pondered and reflected in the wilderness for a bit. In the end, he still had to go do proper business. The wilderness wasn't like the main roads of Xia City. As long as he left the metropolitan area, there would be countless dangers and troubles. In the end, he was near the outskirts of the city. The military had turned from defense to offense in recent years, slaughtering and driving away the extremely dangerous mutants in the surroundings. Even if there were 2 or 3 mutants that escaped the net, Luo Nan would be instantly warped by the magnetic optical mica from a distance of 10 kilometers away. They would be turned into mincemeat. Unfortunately, It wasn't enough to make a useful toy. Luonan didn't care about anything else. He recalibrated the position of the laboratory ruins and prepared to move over. But right at this time, a few reactions unexpectedly bumped into his core sensing network from the direction of Spring City. He turned his head. A surging yellow dragon had already risen in the boundless wilderness behind him. It was the sand and dust kicked up by off-road vehicles. The other party was heading in this direction at high speeds. Of course, Luonan could leave them in the dust in the blink of an eye, but he still stopped and looked back with a bit of curiosity. Not long after, several armed off-road vehicles that clearly bore the colors of the military appeared at the edge of his field of vision. It was just that they were limited by the uneven terrain of the hills, making them appear and disappear. The people within the thick armor certainly didn't have Luonan's perceptual ability. But with the support of the modern technological system, they utilized satellites and radars to form a network. They could still discover Luonan's existence ahead of time. This was under the premise that Luonan didn't deliberately conceal himself. Therefore, there were weapons on the armored off-road vehicles long before Luonan could see them. They locked onto the target from afar, and there were even unmanned surveillance drones flying towards them. Luonan raised his eyebrows. He just stood there, waiting to see how the other party would haggle. And over a dozen kilometers away, Lieutenant Colonel Chen of the Spring City Close Defense Army scratched his head within the vehicle that was stirring with dust. Where did this person pop out from? Fortunately, they weren't on patrol today. The problem was that they weren't on patrol. If they were on patrol, they would send drones to interrogate this youth who had suddenly appeared outside the city. After distinguishing him clearly, they would detain him and beat him. It would be much more refreshing. But right now, the first thing he thought of was to circle around him. Even if one didn't think with their knees, one would know that this youth who had suddenly appeared in the boundless wilderness was either an idiot or a lucky person. Or he was a special character that needed special attention. Looking at his bare body, he didn't look like the brainless donkey traveler of the present age who used his feet to measure the wilderness. He was dressed as if he was going to attend a funeral. Huh? Lieutenant Colonel Chen subconsciously glanced behind him. This was because the key person in the escort this time was dressed a bit similar to the one over there. He looked behind him. The old man he was paying attention to was frowning and closing his eyes. He was doing his best to fight against his motion sickness. And the guide that he had specially hired was sitting there in a very restrained manner. On the other hand, the valiant and beautiful female graduate student was leisurely fiddling with the projection. Yes, this person had quite a high level of authority. As long as she didn't randomly take pictures, she could do whatever she wanted. Lieutenant Colonel Chen was still bickering when someone said in his ear, "This person looks familiar." Captain Cho Wei, who was beside him, was a bit lower in rank than Lieutenant Colonel Chen. But he had the halo of a Spring City hero. He was also a full-time member in charge of this security mission. Lieutenant Colonel Chen still valued Cho Wei's opinion, especially when Cho Wei's words had substance. "You've seen him before?" Cho Wei shook his head. "I think I saw him in the distributed information." Huh. Lieutenant Colonel Chen cast his gaze towards the onboard AI projection interface. It had long since analyzed the recorded image, but there were no results. He could basically confirm that this person wasn't a resident of Spring City. Then, where did the information come from? Lieutenant Colonel Chen could only ask. As a burner, Cho Wei's authority in certain areas was above his. "Hello, Junior Luo?" Before Cho Wei could reply, the female graduate student had already turned on the communicator. She was probably calling the school. Lieutenant Colonel Chen frowned. Before he could say anything, his sensitive ears heard a faint echo from the other side. "Senior Sister Tang? I see you." The one who was surprised wasn't the other side, but the one in the car. The other side laughed. "I see you too." At this time, on the projected interface of the AI, the teenager waved his hand in the direction of the camera. Very quickly, the other side gave a thumbs up, looking like a poor backpacker asking for a ride. Lieutenant Colonel Chen only felt that it was absurd. At this moment, two people in the car spoke at the same time. "Stop the car." The one who spoke was the female graduate student who had called earlier. The other was Captain Cho Wei, who was beside her. At this moment, the car was only about 2 kilometers away from the teenager. Lieutenant Colonel Chen subconsciously replied, "Stop now. Bring him up." The female graduate student replied matter-of-factly, he actually didn't object. Lieutenant Colonel Chen's brows were tightly locked. Due to his trust in He, a professional, he still readily agreed. "Stop over there for a moment." 2 minutes later, the armored motorcade stopped. The teenager boarded the car without a trace of politeness. His mouth was quite sweet as he repeatedly said things like, "Sorry for the trouble, everyone." As the commander, Lieutenant Colonel Chen actually didn't react. He just stared blankly at the information he had pulled out. At this time, the old man in the back of the car who couldn't withstand the tossing and turning opened his eyes. He just happened to meet the teenager face to face. He was a bit muddle-headed from the motion sickness just now. "Hey, this is your Professor Wu?" The teenager's attitude was very respectful. He still bowed in the narrow space. "I've often heard Senior Sister Tang and Senior Sister Tian mention you and Professor Pan." The old man in the car was Professor Wu Zuanliang. He was older but his mind was first class. He was startled for a moment before he straightened his back. Tian Si? You're... Yes, she's mentioned you many times. Qingwen and Zhongheng's child, Luo Yuandao's grandson Luo Nan. Luo Nan bowed again. "It's me, Professor Wu." Chapter 1122. Sure enough, it was Luo Nan. Lieutenant Colonel Chen pulled his gaze away from the information with great difficulty. Even though the content he saw was incomplete due to the issue of authority, the master before him was undoubtedly a huge trouble on the level of a human-shaped killing machine. Last year in Xia City, last month in Ban City, he had caused a great deal of panic. Now he had come to Spring City. Lieutenant Colonel Chen was unwilling to let Luo Nan get on the car. Of course he was unwilling. But this master had even made the gesture of hitching a ride. If Lieutenant Colonel Chen dared to refuse, only the heavens knew whether or not an infrasonic wave would immediately follow. Of course, looking at Lieutenant Colonel Chen's attitude toward Professor Wu Zuanliang, the infrasonic wave would most likely have a direction. The target would only be Lieutenant Colonel Chen himself. All sorts of thoughts rose and fell in Lieutenant Colonel Chen's mind. He madly added scenes for himself, but in the end it was only a method to reduce the pressure. As a qualified military personnel, he promptly sent the news of Luo Nan's appearance in Spring City to the higher command nodes, giving those truly powerful people headaches. But then again, Luo Nan was the most worry-free person in the car just from the surface. He perfectly displayed the cleverness that a person his age should have in front of a senior like Wu Zuanliang. "Oh my God, I called you so many times. Why didn't you come to the house?" In the end, it was our family's old Pan who took the initiative to find you. Wu Zuanliang was an old man who was full of energy. His voice was loud and clear. Once his emotions rose, there was no room for others to speak. Plus, he was good at making decisions for others. He pulled Luo Nan to sit beside him and spoke over and over again. "You're going to offer sacrifices, right? Who are you coming with? By yourself? This is too dangerous. Let's go together. Let's go together." What else could Luo Nan say aside from nodding? Even in Acumen College, Professor Wu Zuanliang was famous for his temper and nagging. He was like this with people he hated, and he was like this with people he liked. A dozen seconds later, Luo Nan couldn't take it anymore. His gaze turned to Tang Yi, who was also peony. Tang Yi intentionally used the brim of her hat to block his line of sight. Luo Nan was helpless. He could only save himself. He took the initiative to pull Wu Zuanliang into a new topic. "Didn't your research come to an end? Did you come to Spring City to take it a step further? Hey, you pay attention to this field as well? Did you listen to the report at the academy?" "I was out of town at the time, but it's true that I've been paying attention all this time. Senior Sister Tang has provided me with quite a bit of information." Luo Nan quickly dragged Tang Yi into the water. "Senior Sister never mentioned this to you. Thanks to her care, I have a laboratory in the Mystic Arts Research Society under her rule, which is at North Shore Gear." Wu Zuanliang wasn't an old pedant with a one-track mind. His emotions had just gotten to the top of his head, but now his thoughts spun a few more times. He recalled the relevant information his wife had mentioned, as well as a few rumors within the circle. He used his old eyes that weren't dizzy to size up Luo Nan a few more times. You're so young. You're only 16, and you're already taking over old Luo's job? 17. Luo Nan corrected him seriously. Looking at your face and listening to your croaky voice, I'd believe it even if you cut off 3 or 5 years. As for your height, there's still room for improvement. Back then, Zhongheng and Qingwen weren't short. Wu Zuanliang saw that Luo Nan was about to stray thousands of miles from the main topic, but he used his rich experience to pull the topic back. I heard from old Pan that you're more interested in Qingwen's original path. You seem to have quite some achievements. You rely on your own ability to make a living. You're young but you're amazing. Luo Nan laughed. You flatter me. There's no need to flatter me. I still have more to say. We men aren't strangers. There are some things I'm not afraid to say to you. From the looks of it, this project is quite imaginative. It can incite people even more. In comparison, the evidence is a bit weaker. It's fine for a young man to be interested. You don't have to worry about putting your energy into it. But you need to make thorough preparations. Don't have thoughts of accomplishing everything in one go. Tang Yi lowered her head, pulling the brim of her hat even lower. Luo Nan blinked. Then you came over this time for the sake of enriching evidence? I'm here to fan the flames for the investor. I want to see if I can stir up a few sparks. Wu Zuanliang really didn't avoid it at all. You have to do a few things to spend other people's money. It's still a bit early for you to learn these things. Luo Nan laughed again. Wu Zuanliang couldn't really lead a child astray, so he changed the topic. Oh right. Let me introduce you. This is Dr. Wang Xiao. He once worked with Qingwen in the laboratory. This time, I'm asking him to take us to the laboratory ruins. He was referring to the tightest person in the car. Luo Nan turned his gaze and bowed slightly to the balding middle-aged man. Hello, Dr. Wang. Hello. Wang Xiao looked like a pure researcher. He wasn't very good at socializing. He needed Wu Zuanliang to liven up the atmosphere. Wang Xiao, you should have met Luo Nan before. He stayed in the wilderness for nearly 3 years when he was young. I've met him before. In the health pod. Wang Xiao instinctively felt that something was wrong when he spoke to this point. He hurriedly shut his mouth, but he didn't know how to continue. He was stuck there. Luo Nan was a bit startled, but a smile soon formed on the corner of his mouth. I've heard my aunt talk about this before. It's just that it's been passed down a few times. I don't know the details anymore. I can only guess blindly by myself. Is the health pod still there? It was still there when we left. Wang Xiao was shrouded by Luo Nan's gaze. He inexplicably felt a bit breathless. His words were a mess. Then there was an earthquake. I don't know what happened. Earthquake. Luo Nan's consciousness was a bit erratic. Lieutenant Colonel Chen adjusted his state of mind at this time. He took the initiative to talk. In 94, a group of volcanoes in the southwest suddenly erupted, causing an earthquake in the surroundings of Spring City. The laboratory was abandoned for many years. It wasn't maintained, so it was unfortunately destroyed. But there wasn't any subsequent excavations. It's basically still in a natural state. Luo Nan nodded towards Lieutenant Colonel Chen. Actually, he had already learned of the relevant information before coming here. The source of the information was none other than Dr. Wang Xiao, who was in the car. Luo Nan's mind wandered just now because he thought of the source of the destruction of the laboratory ruins. It was a headless case of the inner world, the disappearance of the extraordinary Jin Buhuan. Under the relatively restricted environment of space and time, 2 or more matters that were originally completely unrelated would have a high probability of being related. And the more information a person grasped, the higher their position, and the wider their field of view, the more frequent this sort of coincidence or interaction would be in their eyes. The current Luo Nan was probably one of the most qualified people on Earth to speak such words. He didn't need to share his feelings in this kind of environment. He just smiled at Wang Xiao. You really did the right thing in finding Dr. Wang. I heard from Yin Lu this morning that you contacted her and asked if everyone was in the same group. At the time, I thought that I had other arrangements, so I didn't come together. But I never thought that it would be such a coincidence that the high and the low would converge. Ah, it's nothing. It's nothing. Dr. Wuxia wasn't an idiot. He had already said this, so how could he not know Luo Nan's identity? It was just that there was a bit of a psychological barrier when it came to connecting the rich and overbearing financial backer, the boss of the woman with the extraordinary way of talking, with this 16 or 17-year-old youth before him. He was a bit dazed for a time. Wu Zuanliang introduced Lieutenant Colonel Chen to Luo Nan, saying that Luo Nan had settled down at the supply base that Lieutenant Colonel Chen was in charge of last year. Everyone had a pleasant cooperation, and so on. Luo Nan didn't say anything to this person. He was just polite. However, Luo Nan's attitude towards Chou Wei, the head of security responsible for Wu Zunliang's group, was a bit different. You must be Captain Chou. I've heard a lot about you. Senior sister Tang just so happened to be in Spring City at the end of last year. She even specially introduced your deeds. Sister Yuan also mentioned you. She said that you are firm and unyielding. If you weren't like this, then you wouldn't have such deeds. It seems that you and Tianbang are in the same batch? You flatter me. Chou Wei had experienced many trials and tribulations during this period of time. He had already trained the ability to remain unfazed by praise and humiliation. His response towards Luo Nan's praise was indifferent. Of course, part of this was because he was the same as Lieutenant Colonel Chen. He didn't know how to interact with this highly dangerous person in a more appropriate manner. Lieutenant Colonel Chen promptly interjected at this time. Mr. Luo Nan, did you come to Spring City specifically to visit a grave? Lieutenant Colonel Chen actually accompanied Luo Nan out of courtesy in the escort team. This was mainly because the wilderness laboratory ruins were within the range of his supply base. Chou Wei had taken over Senior Colonel Meng Tu's position from last year. This also resulted in some words that Chou Wei spoke rather stiffly. Lieutenant Colonel Chen was relatively more natural. Unfortunately, Lieutenant Colonel Chen's slick mind wasn't within the scope of Luo Nan's consideration. He shook his head. I can't say. It's just a thought. Luo Nan's response was more or less unexpected. Lieutenant Colonel Chen choked for a moment. Tang Yi's gaze turned to Dr. Wang at this time. Dr. Wang was a bit startled. Fortunately, he reacted and took the initiative to explain. Dr. Bu wasn't buried here. The environment of the wilderness back then was much worse than it is now. When we come to work in the wilderness laboratory, we have to do two things before we start working. The first is to sign a risk notice. The second is to make a will. After Dr. Bu passed away, her ashes were scattered in the wilderness according to the requirements of her will. There was nothing we could do about it. Wu Zuanliang had a wealth of experience working in the wilderness. He patted Luo Nan's hand and sighed. There's no such thing as a calm burial in the wilderness. There's no space for a peaceful burial. The best ending for an unfortunate death here is to leave behind a handful of ashes. Qingwen was a bit more free and easy than others. Wang Xiulian nodded. Actually, we advised him to bring the ashes back to the city, but Dr. Luo still followed the will. At that time, he drove to the plateau alone. I heard that he threw it near a frontline laboratory. Luo Nan's gaze cut over, and Dr. Wang subconsciously shut his mouth. He didn't know if he said something wrong or not. Wu Zuanliang did not pay attention to these details. He continued to muse. All these years my old pan has been brooding over this. He doesn't even know where Qingwen is buried. It wasn't easy for me to get the news from Luo Yuan, but it's just like what you said, Xiaonan. Luo Nan didn't look at anyone this time. His eyelids drooped as he repeated the keywords from Wu Zunliang's words. Luo Yuan? Chapter 11:23. Wu Zunliang went. Oh, it's that young fellow who came from the same orphanage as Qingwen. He should be 50 years old this year. Back then, he almost became my graduate student. In the end, he became Qingwen's follower and went to the wilderness. You're young. You probably don't have an impression. No, I have a very good impression. After all, it was a rarely seen dimensional crossbow that utilized the laws of the polar domain. It nearly took my life. Of course, Luo Nan just revealed a smile at this time. He seems to have been operating a business in the wilderness these past few years. He's doing quite well. He also has a stake in Dr. Wang's company. Wu Zunliang was rather emotional. It's not easy. Really? Luo Nan's gaze followed Wu Zunliang's description, and he saw Dr. Wang's expression turn a bit odd. Dr. Wang just nodded his head over and over. From the perspective of a city dweller, the meaning behind operating a business in the wilderness and doing well was quite subtle. Wu Zunliang was quite natural. We originally agreed to go together, but he had something to do at the last minute, so he introduced Dr. Wang. Has he been in contact with you guys these past few years? No. I heard my aunt mention that the two of them communicated when Dad was here, but their relationship didn't seem to be too good. Half of Luo Nan's words were fabricated. He had indeed heard the main contents of the story from Mrs. Luo Shuqing once. Of course, Mrs. Luo Shuqing had only mentioned a fellow with the surname Luo at the time. Due to a certain suggestion from her father, the project succeeded. The fellow called her father in his excitement and cursed him, calling him a deserter, a piece of trash, and so on. Luo Nan had some suspicions about who it was, but he didn't know for sure. But from the contents relayed by his aunt, it should be someone active in the wilderness, someone who once worked together with his father. Luo Nan highly suspected that this Luo was actually Luo, but he didn't have any clear evidence. But they were chatting right now. They needed to gather information and expand in depth. They needed a starting point. Professor Wu Zunliang laughed and sighed when he heard this. The matters of young people. Of course, he's not young anymore. He changed the topic at this point. Little Nan, you're in your prime. I heard you talk about this sister and that sister. You seem to know quite a few. You seem to be quite likable. Huh. Yeah, everyone knows about Boss Luo's hobbies. Tang Yi added with a smile. Realization dawned on Wu Zunliang. I remember now. Old Pan did mention this before. In the end, Luo Nan had seen many shameless people during this period of time. He had many references when imitating them. Luo Nan just revealed an awkward yet polite smile. Then he quickly changed topics. You know, my situation here is special. Uncle and Aunt don't talk to me about what happened in the past. It's impossible to ask Grandpa. Old Luo. I haven't seen him for a few years. The older I get, the more I can't stand it. How is he? Luo Nan responded in a reserved manner. It can't be any worse. Professor Wu Zunliang sighed yet again. His heart was filled with feelings of pity for this little fellow, Luo Nan. He strove to recall more and more, displaying his specialty in nagging to start a long chat mode. He still felt that this was not enough. He even took the initiative to start a video call with Professor Pan. First, he dragged Luo Nan over to appear on camera together. He showed off today's wondrous travel experience. As expected, he stirred up the emotions of Professor Pan. Then he dragged his wife over to talk about the past. That's where the convoy is. They quickly advanced toward the laboratory ruins in this atmosphere. Lieutenant Colonel Chun, whose mind was filled with past events, was roughly a dozen kilometers away. He was worried about whether or not he would encounter additional risks due to knowing too much. At the same time, he dutifully informed Luo Nan. There's around 5 minutes left. Are we almost there? The limited field of view of the armored vehicle clearly couldn't satisfy Wu Zunliang's requirements. He simply stood up and looked through the windshield in front of him. Just stop for a bit. Professor Pan felt quite helpless towards his wife's temperament. The two of them were both loud and clear. They had a few conflicts when they were talking about the past. It was inevitable that they would get a bit tired after yelling at each other from several thousand kilometers away. He took this opportunity to take the initiative to call a truce. We're almost there. We need to take care of things. What's the point of being so anxious and pale? Luo Nan. Professor Pan. I've heard quite a bit of news about you these past 2 days. Let's not talk about anything else. Since you've already made a name for yourself, you need to put on an act. Let your mother's soul in heaven be at ease. Let my shop shine. Oh my. What are you saying these pretentious words for? Wu Zunliang pointed at the projection area in annoyance. Luo Nan chuckled and responded with drooping eyes. As you wish. Professor Pan seemed to laugh and sigh. He simply cut off the video. Wu Zuanliang was still mumbling. I'm afraid I've seen too much in the past 2 years. I didn't realize it before. No one dared to respond. At this time, it was the turn of the others to take the initiative to change the topic. Tang Yi estimated the distance and turned to Dr. Wang. I remember you saying before you came that senior sister Qingwen didn't stay in this laboratory for long. Yeah. From what I remember, Dr. Bu stayed in the 100 Races laboratory for around half a year. She was mainly in the Highland Frontier laboratory before. She might not come down even once in a year or two. The main reason she came down this time was to wait to give birth. She seems to be suffering from severe altitude sickness. Dr. Wang's voice grew softer and softer. Even though his EQ was lacking, he felt that it was inappropriate to speak halfway through and associate what happened later. Plus, Luo Nan was separated from him by Professor Wu. Though he still had a smile on his face, Dr. Wang inexplicably felt that the atmosphere in the car had become very oppressive. He instinctively wanted to shut his mouth, but the young boss Luo, who came up to get a free ride, leaned forward slightly. His smiling and curved eyebrows were completely exposed before Dr. Wang's eyes. He took the initiative to ask, I know a bit about Mom's matters on the Highland. That can be considered her profession. In this laboratory, the 100 Races, right? What is she doing? This was like the pure curiosity of a child. At least Luo Nan showed it this way. It looked like he wasn't thinking too much. My ass. If Dr. Wang hadn't communicated with Mrs. Yin these past few days, he might have believed Luo Nan when he saw Luo Nan's standard, obedient grandson appearance. But he had such a meticulous and capable subordinate. Moreover, Luo Nan had casually extended his hand to stop the military vehicle. Luo Nan made Lieutenant Colonel Chun and Captain Cho exceptionally cautious and well-behaved. Could such a fellow really be pure and stupid? Dr. Wang relied on his IQ to see some clues, but his EQ was insufficient to support an appropriate response. The more this was the case, the more speechless he became. Next to him, Luo Nan's seemingly simple and pure smile gave him more and more pressure. Fortunately, Tang Yi followed Luo Nan's lead and asked at this time, Dr. Wang, you research genetic engineering, right? Since the 100 Races laboratory is in the wilderness. It should be researching mutant genes, right? Our fields of study cross paths. Ah yes. But I'm doing it very shallowly. I'm saying that I'm doing it relatively shallowly. Actually, I'm really ashamed of the 10 years I've spent since returning from the wilderness. As long as he could open his mouth to speak, he could erase the awkwardness and reduce the pressure he felt from Luo Nan. Dr. Wang couldn't care less. Actually, the things I'm researching right now are much shallower and more fragmented than when I was in the laboratory. Let's not talk about the direction. There are many rules and regulations that I don't dare to jump out of. Having said this, Dr. Wang looked at the 2 military personnel at the front of the vehicle. He couldn't help but feel a bit guilty. Tang Yi just so happened to continue at this time. I heard my teacher say that Mr. Luo Yuandao's level of thought experimentation and project design is far from what the results of the laboratory can reflect. That's not what I said. Wu Zuanliang chuckled. My original words are that the things in his brain are like flying a kite. The wind is just a bit stronger, and all the serious experiments that are tied to the back of his head fly away. Having said this, the old man felt that Tang Yi was going a bit overboard when he saw the gaze Tang Yi cast over. He hurriedly patted the back of Luo Nan's hand twice. You understand the intent. You understand the intent. Tang Yi's explanation is quite good. Luo Nan smiled and nodded. I understand. Sometimes, grandfather's train of thought is dragged particularly far away. However, I feel that his research on the biological plane is quite solid. I've only studied a portion of the notes. It's mainly some knowledge on the application of targeted drugs. But I feel that there should be even more fundamental things existing beneath this applied knowledge. So I want to ask Dr. Wang, what was the research related to genetic engineering back in the 100 Races laboratory? Were there any clearer results? You wouldn't have a confidentiality agreement or something like that, right? The agreement has already expired. Actually later on Dean Luo. Oh, that's Mr. Luo Yuandao. That's what we all called him back then. When Dean Luo was investigated, the relevant agreement became invalid. So you're saying that a lot of the results have already leaked out? You can say that. Dr. Wang's forehead unconsciously beaded with sweat. He didn't know why the topic had suddenly changed to such a sensitive and serious direction. He still wanted to salvage the situation. At this time, talking about the details of Bo Qingwen back then didn't seem that hard to accept. There were indeed many topics in the laboratory back then, including the controversial formatting theory. But I didn't come into contact with these things back then, and I didn't really understand them. From what I know, Dr. Bo was mainly recuperating back then. He didn't take on any specific tasks. From what I remember, helping Little Wu design a special petri dish is one of them. Little Wu? Wu Jun? Wu Zuanliang interrupted. I haven't seen Wu Jun in 6 or 7 years. Luonan blinked his eyes. Aunt Wu Jun's surname is also Wu. She's your. You can say she's related. After all, you can't write 2 Wus in one stroke. Hey, do you remember things from your childhood? Or did I just say? No. I met her friends and family in Spring City. Luonan was referring to Yen Fun and Polio, whom he met in the U-Hole market in Spring City. As his thoughts spun, Polio, the former bosom friend, who viewed his father as an enemy, flashed in Luonan's mind with a stubborn and adorable face. Luonan subconsciously laughed, but he soon frowned. The car slowed down at this time. They arrived at the laboratory ruins. Chapter 11:24. When he got out of the car, Wu Zuanliang was still confused. Home? There shouldn't be anyone left in her family. Back then, old Luo Tuapanda was old Pan's younger brother. At that time, he was working in Spring City. Old Luo asked him to help recruit a few graduate students who could work nearby. I felt that it was tough for Wu Jun to study alone in Spring City, so I spoke up for her. Yes, it's Professor Panda. Lil Wu and I were recruited in the same batch as him. Lil Wu is the youngest in this batch. Dr. Wang was the first to get out of the car. He breathed in the slightly hot and dry air of the wilderness, and felt that the pressure on him had lessened a little. His body movements became a lot livelier, and he nodded like he was pounding garlic. When it was Wu Zuanliang's turn, he refused Tang Yi's support. When Luonan took over, he didn't refuse, but he still put on a vigorous posture. He even jumped a little at the end. At the same time, he did not stop talking. At that time, I was also thinking that Wu Jun's personality was relatively weak, and she would not be able to come up with anything on her own. She might as well borrow old Luo's name to train herself. In the end, she really dived headfirst into it. It's just that your Luo family has infected her with mysteriousness. She didn't even say anything about that project of hers. It was old Luo who mentioned it earlier, that it was an ecological network at the genetic level aimed at the mutants. Distributed Aberration Gene Network Ecology Research, Professor Wang blurted out. It was rare for him to say the name so fluently. Luonan raised his eyebrows, but then he took the initiative to change the topic. Your joints and muscles are quite active. Luonan gave an appropriate evaluation. She usually takes care of herself properly. She soaks in the health pod quite a bit. Moreover, it should be targeted training. Wu Zuanliang felt that Luonan's words were objective, and that his vision was unique. Wu Zuanliang felt quite comforted in his heart. City people do field work. Don't they have to put in a bit of effort? As the old man spoke, he stood still and looked around. This area was still very desolate, but within his field of vision, including the area under his feet, he could see faint traces of human activity. Occasionally, he could see edges and corners in the depths of the weeds, which were the remains of some buildings. This place was indeed in ruins, the kind that was completely destroyed. The most eye-catching thing in the vicinity was the vehicle and personnel that they had brought with them. Other than the armed vehicle that had transported them over, there were nearly 20 soldiers or military-style bodyguards on the other 2 armored vehicles. They were all equipped with exoskeletons, and there were even 4 deep blue walkers inside. They had already pulled up a cordon around them. Generally speaking, 1 or 2 grade B ability users would not dare to provoke this team. Luonan looked at Tang Yi. Your sponsor is quite generous. After all, It's a project that has a high chance of being selected as one of the Star Alliance's Millennium Focus topics. Furthermore, it's especially easy to use in terms of concept and size. Tang pinched the brim of her hat and smiled subtly. Compared to the possible profits, the research funding is only a small amount. At this time, Lieutenant Colonel Chen walked over from the front of the car. Professor Wu, according to the data in the database, there are no longer any mutant species of B and above in the surrounding area. The closest mutant nest is 200 kilometers away, so it's basically safe. But it's best if we don't stay for too long. This is still an area where low-altitude predators frequently roam. Okay. Wu Zuanliang agreed without meaning it. His gaze shifted from Luo Nan's face to Dr. Wang. We don't have any concept of this place. We'll leave the rest to you. It's been a few years since I've been here. I definitely remember the way. Right now, Dr. Wang was practically the focus of everyone's attention. He couldn't help but be a bit nervous. He subconsciously found an excuse for himself, but soon he made another statement under Luo Nan's gaze. He gestured with his hand as he spoke, inviting the group of people to move forward. There's actually quite a distance between this place and the original core area of the laboratory. What we see before us is just a defensive bunker from back then. Half of it is above ground, and the other half is underground. The laboratory is completely underground, so the damage caused by the earthquake was extremely severe. Luo Nan didn't understand, so he asked, "Why is it underground?" "There's a natural karst cave there." "But wouldn't that be even more dangerous?" "The danger level of mutants will be even higher in a humid environment with little light, or even no light." Dr. Wang was speechless. Luckily, Luo Nan didn't delve too deeply into the matter. The group of people continued forward. The outer cordon also moved along with them. There were also 3 armed vehicles causing quite a clamor in the wasteland. Luo Nan cast his gaze over, but he didn't say anything in the end. However, Lieutenant Colonel Chen, who had been paying attention to the changes in Luo Nan's expression, immediately pulled on Captain Chow's arm. He exchanged a few glances with Captain Cho. Perhaps there was also internal communication. In short, Captain Cho hesitated for a few seconds before giving the order to have the armed vehicles stand by. Only the security personnel followed. Without the rumbling of machinery, the surrounding environment suddenly became much quieter. It was to the extent that Dr. Wang's voice became all the clearer. Since he was stumped by the question just now, he did his best to change the topic to a direction he was good at while acting as a tour guide. The vast majority of our group of people participate in the distributed gene project. We differentiate and separate mutant genes, determine their growing environment, and think of ways to make them live together. It's similar to mulling over a microscopic ecosphere. According to Dean Luo's words, structure is the most important thing. Whether it's the structure of the ecological food chain, or the structure of the physical bearing space environment. Dr. Wang's words became more and more fluent when he spoke of familiar technical fields. Back in the laboratory, we were mainly in charge of the design of the food chain. Little Wu was mainly in charge of designing an idealized coexistence environment. Both sides worked hard together to ensure that they were able to complete a cyclic dynamic gene competition map in a continuous spacetime environment. They used this to compare the nature and evolutionary trends of the various mutant genes that appeared in the wilderness. They wanted to see which ones were stronger, and which ones were weaker. They wanted to see whether or not they were in line with the actual environment of the mutant species in the wilderness. On the other hand, they wanted to find an ideal genetic coding sequence. Those who dabble in biology are basically pursuing these things. Wu Zuanliang gave a brief evaluation. Then he looked pensive. "I've seen your thesis online. Indeed, a considerable portion of it is in the field of gene competition. Even though it's been over a decade, it's still quite insightful looking at it now." Dr. Wang could only say, "I'm ashamed." At this time, he was already unable to stop himself. He continued to speak emotionally. "For the sake of enriching the gene pool, we've really had many dealings with mutants over the years. All kinds of experiments. Especially the genetic samples of some powerful mutants. The laboratory has no way of collecting them. It's especially troublesome to go through official channels. We can only entrust it to the wilderness hunters and tribes. We have to spend large sums of money every year. There were several times when I thought that the laboratory wouldn't be able to support itself, but in the end, we didn't fall because of money. Instead, we fell because of other messy matters. Wu Zuanliang sighed. He wanted to say a few more words, but it was dull and tasteless. The group had already walked over 200 meters and by now, Lieutenant Colonel Chen dutifully informed them. There's a collapsed area up ahead. For the sake of safety, it's better to maintain a certain distance. Dr. Wang also agreed. The structure of the collapsed area is unstable. Oh, actually, that area used to be one of the safe areas of the laboratory. It was Dr. Bu's time. It suffered an impact and became relatively weak. It collapsed the most severely during the earthquake. Luonan turned to look at him. Is it there? Actually, it's a bit to the side. Dr. Wang did his best to organize his words. In the year 80, the laboratory had already been captured. Everyone was hiding in a safe house. In the end, they were threatened by those people outside with explosions. It seems that there were mutants that could travel through the soil, and so on. It was a complete mess. The collapsed area was the area that suffered the heaviest damage back then. Everyone was in a state of panic for the next few years. Their finances were strained, so they never had time to repair it. Dr. Wang didn't describe the situation back then clearly, aside from becoming long-winded due to his nervousness. He didn't even know as much as Luonan did from the data. However, it was this lively mood that drew in a feeling of immersion that was hard to embody with the cold numbers in the manuscript. Luonan's gaze stopped on Dr. Wang's face. Perhaps it was because of his gaze that Dr. Wang was unable to continue. It's probably because of this reason. Luonan pursed his lips slightly. Dr. Wang, you know that I don't really care about why this place has become like this. If it was possible, I would like to hear more about the matters concerning my mother. It's like this. Dr. Bo really lived in seclusion back then. The laboratory's environment wasn't too suitable for pregnant women, so we didn't see her often. In fact, if it wasn't for the accident, I heard that Dr. Bo would have been transferred to Spring City to have a miscarriage. Why didn't she go earlier to have a miscarriage? Why did the accident happen? Dr. Wang was stumped. A low and hoarse voice rang out in front of the group of people during this awkward moment. It overflowed the security personnel's warning line, and was clearly transmitted. Why are there so many whys? If you really want to find a reason, it's nothing more than the terrible curiosity of your Luo family. It brought out bad luck, trouble, and calamity. It infected her and destroyed her. That's all. The security personnel on the warning line and their equipped exoskeletons, including the 4 deep blue walkers, only responded with an alarm after the voice rang out. The 3 armored vehicles that were lagging behind started up accordingly, and came whistling over. However, the person who caused all of this did not make any further moves. Earlier, he had walked up from the entrance of the collapsed area as if he was walking up a staircase. He stood at the edge of the area, wearing the lab coat that was not buttoned up. The corner of his coat was swaying along with the hot and dry air of the wilderness. At first glance, it looked like the staff who stayed behind to welcome the arrival of the guests. Wu Zuanliang was immediately blocked by Captain Cho, but the old man's eyes were very sharp, and he had already recognized the identity of the figure. Luo Yuan. Chapter 1125. An unexpected character had appeared so openly in front of the warning line. Moreover, the alarm had only sounded after the other party had spoken. This was undoubtedly a humiliating failure for Captain Cho and the other security personnel. But Captain Cho didn't have the leisure to taste humiliation. He immediately made adjustments. Through the dynamo core implanted in his body, he commanded the security personnel at the front of the warning line to adjust their formation. He formed a link with the other 4 deep blue walkers in the formation to construct a formatted space together. It was also at this moment that Captain Cho's body, which was originally like an ordinary person's, began to bulge. The fine bone fiber structure flipped out of his muscles and soon formed a dense layer, forming a complicated and regular arrangement. There was also a dark blue reflection on the edge, as if it was a fish scale armor made of steel. In reality, the inner layer of this armor did indeed have a large amount of traces of special strengthening. It was absolutely not the result of a simple mutation. Clearly, while Captain Cho was undergoing treatment in isolation, whether it was out of his own will or not, he had indeed received a considerable degree of research and modification, so much so that he could perform some kind of active mutation and achieve a deep integration with the Deep Blue platform. Captain Cho, can you assist our Foundation in doing some research later? Captain Cho's expression was mostly hidden under the scale armor. Moreover, he was facing straight ahead. No changes could be seen. On the other side, Lieutenant Colonel Chen couldn't help but turn his head. He just happened to see Luo Nan, who had been supporting Wu Zuanliang as a polite junior. Luo Nan withdrew his hand and went straight ahead. There was even a bit of a smile on his face as he passed by Captain Cho. He gave the former a slight nod. Perhaps it was an illusion. But in any case, from Lieutenant Colonel Chen's point of view, Luo Nan wasn't the least bit surprised by this unexpected situation. Moreover, Captain Cho and Lieutenant Colonel Chen didn't have the right to stop him if he wanted to go forward. Only Wu Zuanliang sensed that the atmosphere wasn't right. He raised his voice and shouted, "Luo Nan!" It was also at this moment that the two names that came out of his mouth looked at each other across the warning line. Compared to Luo Yuan's preemptive show of strength, Luo Nan's observation was more meticulous. Or perhaps it could be said that he was a bit more brazen. He sized up the person in front of him from head to toe, especially the person's obviously old clothes. Several seconds later, Luo Nan spoke with an admiring tone. "It's really amazing to be able to find clothes to cover your body in this environment." Luo Yuan's gaze never left Luo Nan. When he heard Luo Nan's words, his overly thin cheeks twitched slightly, but in the end he still responded indifferently. "After all, I've stayed here for a long time. It's normal for me to keep some clothes." The people around them were confused, but the two didn't seem to have any intention of explaining. Luo Nan turned his head around and nodded at the stupefied Dr. Wang. "It looks like a more suitable explanation has come uninvited." This? Dr. Wang did not know whether to respond or not. The muscles on Luo Yuan's cheeks twitched again, and he smiled coldly. "I don't want to say it again. Personal emotions can't be taken seriously. That's the truth. Are you flaunting your preposterous bigotry in front of me?" Luo Nan continued to walk forward, easily crossing the line of exoskeleton armor. The distance between him and Luo Yuan grew closer and closer. "Today you seem to be very happy to display the image of a frustrated and infatuated person in front of me. This isn't even as refreshing as last year's dimensional crossbow. Is it because I'm not so easy to kill now, so you might as well change your method? Are you preparing to disgust me to death?" Luo Yuan's smile seemed to deepen a bit. "You should be enduring the disgust and doing some unqualified but necessary things. Is this the rumored sociopath? Well, I'm not surprised." Luo Nan had already arrived at the edge of the caved-in area. The distance between him and Luo Yuan was no more than 3 meters. From his angle, he could already see the bumpy edges of the caved-in cavern wall, as well as the chaos at the bottom. Yes, there was also the remains of the lizard mutant that had just been possessed and transformed by Luo Yuan. Right now, only a few broken scales remained. This was also a clone body produced by Luo Yuan's laboratory. It had to be said that Luo Yuan's technological route was compatible with Luo Yuan's ability. Luo Nan had prepared ahead of time, and the results were almost the same as Luo Nan's spatial shift. Only the heavens knew how many similar chess pieces Luo Yuan had planted over the years. What level had the production capacity of his laboratory reached? If Luo Nan wanted to get rid of Luo Yuan cleanly and efficiently, he would need to find the unchanging behind the myriad of transformations. All of this happened in a flash of thought. Luo Nan and Luo Yuan looked face to face again, and their eyes carried a bit of killing intent. As for Luo Yuan, the thoughts of his kind had not changed at all. It was just that in this place, in this environment, and in this atmosphere, everyone was more restrained. That was all. Luo Nan was now a bit sociopath. The evidence was that he had begun to seriously consider having a chat with Luo Yuan. At the very least, he wanted to collect some first-hand information for future preparations. Mr. Luo Yuan, although I don't really understand this society, I know that when it comes to socializing, you need to be honest on the surface at the very least. You see, regarding the matters of the past, especially the matters related to my mother. So the people of the Luo family are really people who are willing to be scolded. Luo Nan's gaze continued to grow cold, and so did Luo Yuan. And at this time, Tang Yi suddenly spoke from behind the cordon. Her target was Lieutenant Colonel Chun, who was in a highly tense state. Mr. Lieutenant Colonel, you're from Spring City, right? Were you still in school in the 80s? I went to military school. Lieutenant Colonel Chun was a qualified sociopath. He quickly reacted after receiving Tang Yi's signal. He successfully organized his words. I was already in military school in the 80s. It was no different from entering the army. So, you have an understanding of the wilderness back then? Yes. I didn't just attend classes. I also had patrol missions. Lieutenant Colonel Chun slowly got on the right track. He began to take the initiative to speak. It was much more chaotic than it is now. Not only were the mutants wreaking havoc, but there were also roaming bandit squads composed of vagrants. For a convoy like ours, we basically killed our way through 100 kilometers. Tang Yi entered the role of a supporting character. It's understandable. I just calculated. The distance between the 100 Races laboratory and the nearest supply base is approximately 200 kilometers. It's more than that. The one we passed through was newly built in the year 93. The original base was 180 kilometers further back. It was very easy for mutants or vagrant bandits to cut off the road with such a distance back then. Ah. Lieutenant Colonel Chun thought of Luo Nan's previous question, and was the first to come to a sudden realization. Also, the 80s were affected by several Type A mutants. The first half of the year was the bleeding season around Spring City. It was even more dangerous. Generally speaking, regular and necessary trips into the wilderness would have to wait until the second half of the year. This situation was only alleviated after the all-out counterattack in recent years, and the elimination of the key sources of danger. The so-called bleeding season was similar to the rushing tide in coastal cities. They were both names for large-scale riots by the mutants in the wilderness. This explained why Bo Qingwen was clearly pregnant at the time. Why was she still in the wilderness? Of course, looking at it from another angle, the pregnancy was inappropriate. Luo Zhongheng could also be blamed for it. Luo Nan turned his head to look. His gaze passed through the array of exoskeleton armors and saw Tang Yi, the tallest of them all. Regardless of whether or not Tang Yi could see him, Luo Nan still smiled subconsciously. It was unknown what encouraged Dr. Wang at this time. He spoke in a weak voice. Speaking of the bleeding season, I seem to remember a bit. Tang Yi continued to cooperate with him. Is it related to the bleeding season? It's the surrounding tribes. Dr. Wang did his best to recall. Back then, the laboratory was able to stand over there. A good portion of it was because we got along well with the vagrant tribes next to us. Sometimes bandits would surround us, and everyone would help each other out. But the bleeding season that year was especially long. The tribes that had a good relationship with us were all hurt. Some of them were even forced to migrate to the northwest to avoid the agitated volcanic areas. Especially when the weather turned hot, which was in June, the laboratory received a lot of injured people. They were all from tribes that we were familiar with. Then, something happened a few days later. Luo Nan's extraordinary perception wasn't affected by the distance of a dozen meters. He could hear Dr. Wang's voice no matter how weak it was. As the information entered his mind, many fuzzy details gradually became clear. Suddenly, he thought of something and raised his voice to ask, Dr. Wang, when the accident happened back then, this is the person next to me. Is he there? Luo Yuan's gaze pierced over, but Luo Nan completely ignored him. The person on the warning line stammered a few times before finally responding vaguely, he shouldn't be there. Only then did Luo Nan return Luo Yuan's gaze. Then why are you acting like he was there? Luo Yuan was silent for 2 seconds. Then he suddenly laughed. Yeah. I wasn't there. That damned old man of yours wasn't there. Luo Yuandao wasn't there either. All of us weren't there. So, Qingwen was all by herself. She was all alone there. His voice was still calm, but his arms suddenly swung out. He pointed at the collapsed cave entrance, at an area that ordinary people couldn't see. There she made her life's choice. The last time. The stupidest time. She was even stupider than her choice of Luo Zhongheng. She only chose a lump of flesh. Before she closes her eyes, that thing has no meaning. The sound wave quickly dissipated above the ruins. Some of it crashed into the collapsed cave entrance, causing a weak echo. Luo Nen didn't retort. He stood at the edge of the cave entrance. He could vaguely feel the almost non-existent slight vibration beneath his feet. Soul strength, which was more remarkable, covered an even larger area. It captured even more details. It far surpassed the domain that the basic 5 senses of a human could reach. But Luo Nen still felt that there was a layer of separation here. Since he came from flesh and blood, then he returned with flesh and blood was the correct principle. Luo Nen gazed at the fuzzy and chaotic cave bottom. A second passed before he spoke softly. Take me there to take a look. I'll have to trouble you. Please. Chapter 1126. Luo Yuan straightforwardly agreed to Luo Nan's request. It was so straightforward that Luo Nan suspected that Luo Yuan had come for this very reason. In comparison, persuading Professor Wu Zuanliang to obediently stay outside the collapsed area took a bit more effort. The old professor wasn't stupid. Of course, he could see the high tension between Luo Nan and Luo Yuan. He was afraid that the two would go down and start a fight, causing trouble. Luo Yuan wanted to go down the well. Lieutenant Colonel Chen and Captain Cho tried to persuade him. In the end, Luo Nan walked back and comforted him. Professor, don't worry. I won't do anything today. Tang Yi rolled her eyes at Luo Nan. She turned her head and said with a smile, Teacher, don't worry about this. When immortals fight, mortals suffer. If this continues, the ones who will collapse will be Lieutenant Colonel Chen and the others. Wu Zuanliang glared at her. Immortals my ass. What's so great about being an ability user? It's not like I haven't seen it before. Tang Yi's smile didn't change. In any case, once this membrane was pierced, some things would be easier to talk about. Wu Zuanliang nodded at Luo Nan. He raised his voice and shouted at Luo Yuan. You guys have great abilities. I can't control you guys. It's fine if you don't let me go down, but give me a view sharing. You guys need to remember that I also came with a mission from my family. Okay, we'll do as you say. Luo Nan was the first to agree. Luo Yuan also bowed, tacitly agreeing. Luo Yuan's method of coming over was too rough. He didn't have any electronic equipment on him, so the view sharing was left to Luo Nan. The hexa ear he wore was very good at doing this. After activating the function, Wu Zuanliang didn't continue to nag. He just simply said through the sharing function, Be careful. Luo Nan smiled at Wu Zuanliang. He and Luo Yuan directly sank into the depths of the collapsed hole. As they quickly descended, the sunlight that shone in from the entrance of the cave also weakened rapidly. Soon, only a distorted and swaying shadow silhouette was left in the human's natural vision. The breathing that Wu Zuanliang shared with him was clearly much heavier. For an old man who did not possess supernatural abilities, the experience of rapidly descending in a dark environment without any tools was still a little too stimulating. However, Wu Zuanliang didn't know that what he was able to share with Luo Nan was merely an insignificant small portion of Luo Nan's entire level of perception. Even if it was a simulation carried out by an intelligent instrument with night vision capabilities, it wouldn't be able to display even a fraction of Luo Nan's perception. Whether it was Luo Nan or Luo Yuan, they wouldn't rely purely on their natural vision to capture and process information in this complex dark environment. At this moment, the range, the frequency, and the way they interfered with the material plane represented the breadth, depth, and precision of their senses. Their respective senses would clash and interfere with each other. Especially when there was Luo Nan, a perception freak that covered the entire region. The two of them didn't say anything, but their contact and probing on the level of perception never stopped. Luo Yuan senses Luo Yuan. Luo Yuan's Luan Nan, Luo Yuan's Luo Nan, Luan Nan Luo, I Luo, and Luo Yuan's Nan. Nan. Luo Yuan Nan. But Luo Yuan Nan. Nan. Luo Yuan's Luo Yuan had long ago Luo Nan didn't do this on purpose. He spent most of his energy observing the external environment. He observed the special area where his mother lived and eventually died. However, Luo Yuan's power circulation pattern was too unique. The parasitic clone before his eyes didn't count for anything. It was connected to Luo Yuan. It was an existence like a relay satellite that was outside of the local space-time environment. It was constantly moving in the dark side of space-time. It was far too eye-catching. Its mode of existence and position were very vague. It was separated from the local space-time by the fragmented isolation belt and the deep and distant polar domain. It was its natural cover. But Luo Nan could see it. He could see it more clearly than last year when he was hit by the dimensional crossbow. This was without a doubt the problem Luo Nan had pointed out through the mouth of the horned demon back in Format 70 laboratory. The most valuable thing Luo Yuan, a former laboratory member, obtained in the Misty Labyrinth was very likely a large fragment. It was hidden in the depths of the endless Misty Labyrinth like a sandstorm. It followed Luo Yuan's will, and maintained a close yet distant connection with the local spacetime of Earth. What Luo Nan was able to see was basically this. There didn't seem to be any substantial breakthroughs compared to before. But the most important thing was the details. Conclusive details. I can't calculate the spatial structure distribution of the distorted fragment from 2 points and 1 line right now. But if I have a few more examples. 10. Maybe even fewer. The premise is that the trajectory isn't too complicated. Luo Nan felt that Luo Yuan would regret it in the future. Or it could be said that he would help Luo Yuan regret. Luo Yuan regretted carelessly exposing the connection between the parasitic clone and the plane of existence before him. The problem was, how did Luo Yuan know what level Luo Nan's current sensing mode was at? Even Luo Nan himself was still working hard to adapt. He was adapting to this wide area sensing mode based on the magnetic mica. Ever since he successfully cultivated the first magnetic light on the jadeite light and planted the true seed, the true meaning of the magnetic mica began to grow without interruption. Nearly a month's time was enough for the larval form of the magnetic mica to expand once more. This wasn't just a simple expansion into outer space. It also included the local spacetime environment of Earth and the continuous infiltration of all neighboring planes. The situation in the deep blue world was a bit special. There was no obvious progress for the time being. But in the cloud world, and even in the extremely broken environment of the Misty Labyrinth, the magnetic mica's sensitivity and activity continued to increase. Currently, the only thing that limited Luo Nan's perceptual ability was the structure of his brain. Luo Nan was immortal in the end. His brain was wet inside his skull, and it wasn't like a multi-core supercomputer. It was impossible for him to casually absorb the incalculable flow of information on the level of a trillion at all times. There were even more chaotic, and even unstructured data fragments. So he used the magnetic mica's sensing nature to synthesize distance, danger, focus, and many other conditions to comb and build a new sensing network. The magnetic mica's material foundation was already infinitely close to the microscopic level, and the carrier structure was hard to grasp. Luo Nan's overall ability to observe information on the macroscopic level had yet to recover to the peak state of the water vapor cloak. But the coverage of his sensing domain, his grasp of key information, his sensitivity to danger, and even the efficiency of his instantaneous interference were far greater than before. There was no need to even mention his future potential. Time is on my side. Luo Nan lowered his head, temporarily burying his killing intent against Luo Yuan. This wasn't forbearance. This was planning. His thoughts had completely returned to the plane of reality, but it was unavoidable for him to link up with the past. There was frequent interference on the sensing plane. Ever since they entered the collapsed hole, the two hadn't spoken to each other. From this point of view, Luo Yuan couldn't be considered a qualified commentator, But Luo Nan didn't mind. The longer he stayed in this dark space, the more information his multidimensional perception could absorb and reorganize. Especially in a situation where Luo Yuan had already pointed out the direction. Luo Nan's tentacles of perception touched the target, and the space that held the target a step earlier than his body. Frankly speaking, that place wasn't quite the same as what Luo Nan had imagined. In any case, Luo Nan and Luo Yuan continued to tread on mycelium, moss, stagnant water, and the bones of small animals as they headed in that direction. They passed through collapsed or half-collapsed passageways, as well as empty and dilapidated doorways. They traveled through the chaotic shadowy lines that they collectively constructed. If Luo Yuan was willing to speak, there should be many details worth recalling here. But even though he was silent, the fragments of information revealed in the chaos were still assembled and reconstructed in Luo Nan's mind. So much so that this dark and gloomy space seemed to gradually brighten up, returning to the appearance it once had 17 years ago. But when Luo Nan arrived at an area where most of the structure had collapsed and some parts were already submerged by underground water, he suddenly pressed the stop button. Only an ice-cold reality appeared before his eyes. Luo Yuan stopped walking, meaning, "We're here." Luo Nan didn't need to say much. He had already locked onto the only target within these ruins. The one that once bore Luo Nan's life, but also accelerated the stripping of his mother's life force. The health pod. The passage of time had already stripped away its original appearance. Even the supports beneath it had corroded away. It lay crookedly on the ground, half of it still soaking in the sewage. The pod's cover was sealed, and its integrity was fine. But the parts that were not wet were already covered in a thick layer of moss under the humid environment. The outline was a bit fuzzy. If one were to judge purely by their eyesight, it would be better to say that it was a rock that had fallen from the surrounding buildings rather than a health pod. Luo Nan's soul strength had carried out many rounds of probing before Luo Nan arrived, so he already knew that there was no nutrient fluid inside. It was empty and dry. Clearly, it had never been used since they abandoned the laboratory, or since Luo Nan was born. This thing didn't have a clear sense of existence, and it was very hard to naturally extend a special meaning. Even Luo Nan needed to decorate it with his memories and emotions. There was a bit of a difference. Comparatively speaking, the breathing of Professor Wu Zuanliang that was shared with his ears had a more lifelike quality. "It's here. It's like this." Luo Yuan spoke for the first time since entering the collapsed cave. He was cold and direct. You can try your best to examine your emotions and assign a so-called value to it. But that is nothing more than a play to move yourself. It is meaningless to the deceased. "Are you ready to hell?" Luo Nan ignored him. He just knelt down on one knee, ignoring the puddles and filth on the ground. He slowly wiped away the thick moss on the surface, limiting it to a certain area. A few shallow and unnatural marks were carved on the surface of the health pod a few seconds later. These are scratches? From Luo Nan's perspective, the lower half of these marks was like a simple drawing of a smiling face. And above the smiling face were crisscrossed lines of unknown significance. There should be a pattern to them, but Luo Nan couldn't see it for the time being. "What is this?" Luo Nan asked subconsciously, but he didn't expect Luo Yuan to answer. But Luo Yuan still spoke a few seconds later. Last words. Qing Wen's last words. Chapter 11:27. In the darkness, Luo Yuan's voice was like the tip of a blade rubbing against the moss of the ruins. These marks were smeared with blood when her remains were discovered. The bandits who broke and used a high-power electromagnetic bomb to cut off all communication between the inside and the outside. Aside from the self-operating life maintenance devices like the health pod, all the surrounding electronic devices were destroyed. She could only leave a message through this method. But not long after, the bloodstains dried and blurred. Luo Zhongheng used a knife to carve the original marks as a memento. So this isn't first-hand information. Luo Nan took a deep breath. What's the meaning of this? How would I know? Luo Yuan's tone didn't sound like he was rejecting Luo Nan. Instead, it sounded like he was depressed and jealous. Luo Nan understood. Was it left for my dad? Luo Nan subconsciously curled his lips. Only then did he feel his facial muscles turn numb. It was hard to pull even the tiniest of movements. At the same time, his mind also turned numb. It was to the extent that even the most basic of imagination abilities were frozen. He wanted to replay the scene back then, but his mind was empty. In the end, Luo Nan just put down his other knee. He silently knelt before the remains of the health pod. He gazed deeply, making sure to brand these scratches into the depths of his memory. Gradually, his gaze became a bit empty. It passed through the scratches and the body of the pod to cast into an even deeper place. Luo Yuan saw that Luo Nan didn't move for a long time. He had no intention of respecting Luo Nan's feelings. He brought up an old topic and sneered. Are you really going to cry? Do you want me to step back so you can brew your emotions? Luo Nan didn't pay attention to him. He was like an inanimate sculpture. It would be perfect if he really was dead. Luo Yuan's thoughts spun in his mind. He didn't go so far as to forcefully pull Luo Nan up. He just stared at the back of the young man's head. He pondered the possibility of using the planar crossbow to completely destroy the young man's body and soul. He had to admit that he was the same as the vast majority of people in the world. He was finding it harder and harder to see through Luo Nan. Actually, he didn't see through Luo Nan clearly last year near the city square of Xia City. Otherwise, Luo Nan wouldn't have been able to escape alive. Even if it was a diversion scheme, it was the same. This was even more true now. At that time, he was still able to touch upon the exceptionally fragile boundary between Luo Nan's material and mental state. He could have attempted to obliterate Luo Nan's fleshly body and put an end to all troubles. So today, that border had almost disappeared. Even if he used his unique polar domain perspective to observe, all he could see was the intertwining and disorderly trajectories of the power, as well as the energy clouds that stimulated each other. The muscles on Luo Yuan's cheeks twitched slightly. This time, he was grinding his teeth unconsciously. The more he used clairvoyance, the more he was able to confirm that this kid Luo Nan was mixed and blended together with the material world, the polar domain of the abyss, and the ever-changing sea of consciousness. Even if this fusion wasn't complete, even the word fusion wasn't accurate enough. The so-called fusion could only prove that Luo Nan possessed an extremely powerful interference force towards the domains mentioned above. Even though he wasn't doing anything right now, his very existence had set off undulating waves in many domains. His true existence was hidden beneath these waves that interweaved and influenced each other. No matter what angle one looked at it from, all one could see was an incomplete silhouette. Only by synthesizing different observation angles and refining them could one capture Luo Nan's tracks. But this wasn't an exact answer. For example, even if this youth's body was clearly and plainly placed before one's eyes, one could reach out and touch it. But if one wanted to deal a fatal blow to Luo Nan, one would not just need to pierce through the polluted air of the laboratory ruins. One would need to do so on every plane that Luo Nan could instantly interfere with. Even if the offensive power of the planar crossbow was unparalleled under the heavens, with Luo Nan's current wide-area interference ability, would Luo Nan still be standing there when the planar crossbow pierced through the multifaceted interference waves of the polar domain of the abyss, the mental plane, and the material plane? It must be known that Luo Nan was a bastard proficient in teleportation. The sound of Luo Yuan grinding his teeth was a bit too clear in the extremely quiet environment. Luo Nan, who had been silent for a long time, suddenly opened his mouth. If you want to target me, design an assassination plan or something. Just do some thought experiments. It's best if you don't blindly use the real thing. The real thing that Luo Nan spoke of was obviously the massive spacetime fragment that the planar crossbow was entrusted to. Actually, Luo Nan's words could be interpreted the other way around. He hoped that Luo Yuan would be provoked and make a few more useless attempts. In this way, perhaps it wouldn't be long before Luo Nan could lock onto the location of the fragment and eliminate this hidden danger. Luo Yuan's eyes narrowed, but he didn't oppose Luo Nan with equal harshness. Instead, he maintained his silence. He noticed that the wide-area, multi-layered chaotic interference effect clearly retracted as Luo Nan opened his mouth. It seemed that Luo Nan was exerting his strength before, but now it had returned to normal. It lost a portion of its tension, but it became a bit more gloomy. This undulation caused the surrounding space to slightly fluctuate. What was Luo Nan doing? Luo Yuan was silent in thought, but Luo Nan didn't let him go. After breaking the silence, Luo Nan no longer seemed to be immersed in the confusion of family and the past. He stood up, not caring that his clothes were already soaked in dirty water. He turned his head to look at Luo Yuan. Light gathered in his pupils amidst the darkness, and they flickered coldly. I've suddenly discovered that you always like to do unnecessary things. Is this the after effect of being accustomed to being driven by delusions and emotions? Luo Yuan laughed hoarsely. This is the tone of someone who has been sick for a long time. No, I'm interrogating you. Luo Nan stepped on the dirty water under his feet, and took 2 steps toward the health pod. His knees already touched the body of the pod. He leaned forward and reached out with his hand to touch the ruins of the wall that the tilted health pod was leaning against. A few raps rang out in the darkness. They were deep but not empty. They were solid. But Luo Nan was even more certain. When you were blindly gesticulating just now, didn't you notice that the structure here is more brittle? This is a collapsed area. You know that's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying that this place should be more brittle, especially behind the health pod. There's clearly a point of contact, but you've isolated it. You should understand what I mean. It's not a good habit to play riddles like an adult. I'm really sorry. Luo Nan's apology was directed at Professor Wu, who was outside. In the next second, Luo Nan turned off the shared view function. Then he took out a more straightforward expression. What I mean is that there's a point leading to the misty labyrinth nearby. At the very least, there used to be one. You also call it a labyrinth? You really are of the same lineage. Your naming standards are equally terrible. Luo Yuan answered casually. In the end, he leaned more towards the core. However, the entire project's official name is Cloak. Your grandfather has always insisted on it. Well, it sounds a bit better. There was a deeper meaning to it. But Luo Nan didn't want to be distracted by the name. He just said, if it were to develop naturally, the health pod would have long been swept into the cloak and taken away. Luo Yuan sneered as before. How can it be natural? It's completely a man-made design. It's my father. Yes, it's him. I only discovered later that he didn't have the ability to open up the passageway leading to the labyrinth. So I imitated Qing Wen's design and set up an ambush in the surroundings. I hoped that the power of time would continue to drive the labyrinth and eventually corrode an opening, sending this thing inside. Luo Yuan was calm and unperturbed. Maybe this is an experiment. Maybe it's just a simple ritual. But such an ominous thing obviously needs to scram as far away as possible. He raised his voice and heavily kicked out. The kick was still far from the health pod, but it splashed up a sky full of muddy water. It struck Luo Nan, but it was completely blocked by a barrier of nothingness. Luo Nan grew calmer and calmer. So you imitated my mother's design and created interference? Combined with Dr. Wang's description, my mother's ashes really were sprinkled into the 70-format laboratory. In the cloak, across from us? Of course, it was also possible that it was in the cloud world. Dr. Wang didn't have much understanding of the frontier laboratory on the plateau, but Luo Nan, who had already occupied that place, obviously understood what the most meaningful place was. Luo Yuan didn't speak. Luo Nan laughed. This actually wasn't some delightful information, but it was able to give a bit of symbolic comfort in the subtle subtleties of the human heart. After dispelling the misunderstanding, Luo Nan felt that Mr. Luo Zhongheng's work was quite good. Everything was able to be stopped at a point that Luo Nan could accept. In any case, it seemed that the daily connection between him and his mother had become even closer. Luo Yuan must have noticed the minute change in expression on Luo Nan's face. He hissed, "Sure enough, you're the same as Luo Zhongheng. You're both seemingly gentle and selfish ghosts. Could it be that the person in front of me isn't a paranoid person who forcefully pulls others into his dreams?" The direct and childish quarrel didn't continue. Luo Nan felt complex feelings towards this special equipment that had reconstructed the relationship between himself and his mother. Of course, The most fundamental reason was that Luo Nan and perhaps Luo Yuan didn't want to use Bo Qingwen's emotions as a bargaining chip in their endless struggle. Luo Nan just declared, "So be it with the health pod. You two's imitations are quite clumsy. You can let time make the choice in the future. However, you don't need to go to the 70 format laboratory in the future." "Is that your private property?" Actually, Luo Yuan might not be able to go right now, but he absolutely wouldn't lose in words. "Against an official member of the laboratory?" "Once." Luo Nan simply commented. Luo Yuan's gaze pierced through the darkness. "Are you refusing to negotiate? Or are you trying to increase your bargaining chips?" "Negotiate? Sorry. Your paranoid persona is too successful. I almost believe in your nonsense. So in the future, I need to treat you like a professional gene dealer or a terrorist to be more suitable. Am I right?" "Up to you." Luo Yuan turned around and left through the dirty water. After a few steps, he suddenly turned his head. "I'm quite curious. Did you rely purely on your talent to get to where you are now? Or did your dead father leave you enough things? Or maybe he's giving you some pointers." Luo Nan raised his eyes and looked at Luo Yuan. A moment later, he shrugged. "I roughly understand what's going on with you. People like you don't know how to live if they can't find their enemies. But what if they don't have any enemies? You can add drama to yourself, to others, or simply draw a target to torment. From beginning to end, from beginning to end. The problem is, this world isn't what you think it is. What do?" Luo Yuan laughed softly. "You think you've seen through everything. You're quite similar to your grandfather right now. He used to be a lot more stylish." As he spoke, he took another step and disappeared into the darkness. Not long after, Luo Nan sensed the body and it silently transformed into a paste of flesh and blood. "Hey, if you do this, I won't be able to explain it to Professor Wu. He might even think that I killed you here." Naturally, no one responded. Luo Nan turned around and faced the health pod once more. The smile on his face had already solidified there. It didn't change for a long time. Chapter 1128. Ruiwen floated within the misty maze. The countless fine grains of sand in her surroundings continued to jump about. They didn't have a real trajectory, or perhaps they were just expanding and contracting, striking and repelling each other. These fragmented grains of sand inherited the initial force they received when they were torn apart from their relatively intact state. They also received the effects of countless forces that were of the same or close to the same source, resulting in astonishing complexity. Moreover, the local spacetime of Earth was infected with the support and interference of another set of construction rules. This complexity increased by an order of magnitude, and it continued to grow. There were no rules inherent to ordinary spacetime here, but fragments of similar rules interweaved with each other from time to time, transforming into countless possibilities. There was a peculiar beauty to the process of possibility, its germination and continuation. It was like the continuous spraying of paint on a canvas where not a bit of white could be seen. The flowers that bloomed and withered, constructed by countless coincidences, blossomed and withered in an instant. Of course, actual flowers didn't exist. Only people who truly possessed the corresponding talent and ability were able to glimpse the beautiful and splendid law of possibility. And if one wanted to find and lock onto the most valuable flower within these flowers that bloomed and withered in an instant, then conduct deeper research, not only did one need to possess an extremely strong observational ability, one also needed to have persevering patience, some interference abilities, and even the ability to control oneself. Only then would one's body and mind not be assimilated within this unique and endlessly flowing sea of flowers. Sometimes Ruiwen would find it strenuous, but she would quickly get used to it. This was Ruiwen's method of perception. Ruiwen had been adapting to her own abilities ever since she had awakened through the altar frame that Luo Nan had created. After all, the speed at which her abilities expanded was astonishing. Her extraordinary power had continued to strengthen in the following months, including her long slumber. Moreover, there didn't seem to be a clear barrier or upper limit. Actually, she wasn't too clear on the nature of her own abilities. She didn't know whether or not she was making reasonable use of them. However, it was precisely under the influence of this ability that she had a unique vexation. Ruiwen hadn't mentioned this to anyone. In fact, she wasn't too sure herself, but she seemed to prefer staying within the misty maze up until now. At the very least, this place was still in the midst of continuous changes. In the outside world, in a space-time environment where the basic flow was limited, no matter how brilliant the colors were, they would wither in an extremely short period of time. No matter how complicated the branches were, they would also be erased in the end. What appeared in front of her was only a gray and silent river. Perhaps it would change its direction and shape from time to time, but no matter what, there was no end to it. Occasionally, a small number of shadows would struggle tenaciously in the river, swimming with her in the long river. Then, they would be extinguished and assimilated. As her abilities continued to grow, the colors withered and disappeared faster and faster, and the process of entering a state of deathly stillness also became shorter and shorter. But no matter what, the final result would be the deathly stillness of the ashes, the silent flowing but unfathomable chaos. She instinctively disliked the situation, and had tried to interfere. She seemed to be able to make the people around her stay in the river for a longer time, but it was only an instant before everything returned to silence. In comparison, there were a few who did not need her interference. They struggled in the river of time, and continued to exist for a longer time. Tenacious light and shadow would inevitably make her look at him in a new light. There was no doubt that Luo Nan was an extremely special one among the extremely small number of tenacious light and shadow. Ruiwen was unable to see through the shadow he extended out to this day, and he had always drawn strength from it to strengthen himself, realizing rapid expansion. So much so that Luo Nan was often the one who traveled with her the longest in the long and dark river of constantly changing silhouettes and directions, even if he was warped and deformed many times, becoming unrecognizable. But it wasn't just this. Actually, Ruiwen didn't need to find any reason. She just needed to see the result that appeared in the long and dark river of time. As long as the final shadow was Luo Nan, she would always feel a bit of comfort before entering the ultimate solitude. It should be even further, even further, even further. At this very moment, Ruiwen's gaze pierced through the surrounding chaotic sea of flowers, to gradually lock onto Luo Nan's location. Due to Luo Nan's special position in the structure of her perception, as well as his extraordinary sense of existence in the long and deathly still river, finding Luo Nan was much easier than locking onto any other target in the world. Soon Ruiwen confirmed that point. At the same time, she utilized the unrealized possibilities of the misty maze to draw a rough path ahead of time. Then she used a certain amount of interference power to erect a tunnel that led directly to that point. In the next second, Ruiwen was floating on the long and withered river of countless blooming lights. She flowed downstream, and when she came to a stop, Luo Nan was right before her eyes. Just a bit off. Luo Nan and Ruiwen locked gazes at each other in this moment. Luo Nan's pupils slightly narrowed, and his gaze focused on Ruiwen's body. After a moment of astonishment, he laughed and waved his hand at Ruiwen. The two were close at hand, but there was a transparent glass-like barrier between them. From a specific spatial meaning, Luo Nan was inside and Ruiwen was outside. Oh my! I really shouldn't have chased away the true god and the others. Otherwise, just based on what happened just now, it would be the tempo of a horror movie. In the end, Ruiwen smoothly teleported inside. Her eyes drooped as she listened to Luo Nan's teasing. This was the 70 format laboratory. Luo Nan had just seized it back not too long ago. It was one of the most important assets and results of the Luo family. Every inch of the space that housed the laboratory was designed and constructed by Bo Qingwen back in the day. Bo Qingwen had used local materials and domain fragments to reassemble the laboratory. Though it didn't have the support of supernatural powers, it was still able to exist for a long time within the misty maze that didn't possess the complete laws and structure of spacetime. Just this alone was considered an outstanding construction work even when compared to the Heavenly Yuan Empire's configuration level, let alone on Earth. Luo Nan came here after leaving the 100 Races laboratory. This was outside of his plans, so the timing wasn't easy to grasp. Ruiwen came over to remind him not to forget to go home and eat. I remember. I remember. Luonan responded unhurriedly. Ruiwen looked at him. She kept flipping through the old notebook in her hands. Luonan had a lot of these things in his hands right now. Most of them were from the batch he had traded with the horned demons last time. These were all Luo Yuandao's many years of records and experiences. There was a lot of information, and he was still in the process of sorting them out. But recently, he had been carrying the notebook he had personally retrieved from the jadeite light by his side. There was very little meaningful information on it. Most of it was a jumbled mess of lines that seemed to be dreamwalking. But these lines themselves contained. At the very least, they drew in a special power. Ruiwen swept her gaze over the seemingly meaningless lines on the page. Then she cast her gaze towards the endless sandstorm outside. I ran into Luo Yuan today. Yeah, you haven't really interacted with him. That fellow is quite troublesome. Of course he's even more annoying. Luonan habitually engaged in a one-sided chat with Ruiwen. He described today's encounter and poured out his thoughts. That fellow is annoying. His stomach is filled with a pile of secrets. It's going to rot, but he's still very stingy. He talks halfway, and then he thinks of pricing. No, he's just trying to disgust me. Ruiwen withdrew her gaze from the outside world and stared quietly at Luonan. But the words he said today had a very strong purpose. He revealed some intentions of wanting to cooperate. But what kind of cooperation can I have with him? A mist labyrinth? Or genetic engineering? The former is more likely, but he should know that I won't spit on this matter. Luonan's hands continued to flip through the pages, but the corner of his lips gradually froze. Speaking of which, why do I feel like he's threatening me? He mentioned my grandfather. Speaking of which, the arrangements at the nursing center really can't block the planar crossbow. It'll be hard for me to react in time. Sure enough, it's safest to get rid of such a highly dangerous fellow in time. Ruiwen tilted her head slightly. Do we make our move now? Girls shouldn't easily shout about fighting and killing. Luonan rubbed Ruiwen's head again. Ruiwen lowered her head and let his palm fall on the warm crown of her head. Actually, there's one thing that I'm quite mindful of. Luonan was silent for a moment. Then he suddenly asked for her opinion. Oh Ruiwen, what's your first reaction when you hear this? He's still guiding you? Ruiwen thought seriously. Someone's teaching me? That person. Which one? It doesn't matter which one it is. Let's pick at the words. Both of them say still. This proves that this person has been maintaining contact with me all this time, right? This was how Ruiwen understood it, so she nodded. Then she saw that Luonan was looking at her. His eyes were bright and dark, and the hand pressing down on her head unconsciously increased in strength. Is Luo Yuan just saying this casually? Or is he probing something? Is Luo Yuan suspicious? Or is someone else suspicious? Is he grasping a clue that I don't know of? There are too many things I don't know. Ruiwen didn't quite understand the meaning of these words. She just knew that Luonan's heart was in turmoil right now. It was absolutely hard for him to calm down. His mouth chattered on and on without stopping for a moment. Though his guidance is completely wrong, Luo Yuan's words and his suspicions must have some other basis, right? If there really are some other clues in a certain corner of the world, then it proves that he's still active recently. Ruiwen keenly discovered that Luonan's target of reference had changed. Luonan's lips twitched. The him Luo Yuan is talking about. My father. Huh. Ruiwen was a bit surprised. Luonan's speech sped up. That's right. If he's alive, I want to see him. If he's dead, I want to see his corpse. If he's alive, not contacting me is his usual style. He should have his reasons. Just like back then. F***ck. Luonan smacked his forehead heavily with his hand as he spat out fragrant words. He simply pressed down without letting go. No. This won't do. I can't follow Luo Yuan's tempo. People shouldn't have too many unrealistic hopes. Am I right? This question added too many uncertainties and negatives, so much so that Ruiwen needed to spend quite a bit of time digesting it before she could truly understand Luo Nan's meaning. Luo Nan smacked his forehead once more before she could respond. Yes. We must calm down when it comes to these matters. We won't think about this. We won't think about it today no matter what. Self-hypnosis and self-limitation forced Luo Nan's thoughts into a more realistic domain. He gritted his teeth and changed the topic. We can first mull over more technical problems. For example, how to deal a fatal blow to Luo Yuan. After we dig out all of his secrets. Chapter 1129. At this time, Rui Wen could clearly see how much willpower Luo Nan used in order to forcefully divert her attention from this matter. His words were tough, but he was clearly a bit absent-minded. Luo Yuan was not on the same level of importance as his biological father. Perhaps Rui Wen's expression was too worried, but Luo Nan took a deep breath and revealed a smile to her. Don't worry. My mind is very clear. Judging a person's life and death under the premise of being missing all year round is a huge project. Wanting to obtain an answer in a short amount of time is the same as searching for evidence in one's imagination. How can there be any results? We need to start from a more realistic point of view when we get back. I know what to do. But as he spoke, he changed the topic again. Of course, Rui Wen didn't remind him. She just listened quietly. Luo Nan's mouth grew more and more unstoppable. He used words to organize his thoughts and organize his emotions. You must know that my father's last message was left in the tree hole of the withered tree sandbar. From the message, I can be sure that Li Wei and his henchmen were about to kill their way over. My father didn't have any time to move at that time. So, if something were to happen, it could only happen in Xia City and its surroundings. I just looked up some information. President Ouyang was already an extraordinary at that time. The psychic wave network was already in its embryonic form. Perhaps he could provide some information. Also, I believe that my father won't allow himself to be captured without putting up a fight. He will stir up some noise no matter what. The surveillance from that time. The possibility of this being left behind is too small. But even if there isn't, the extra traces created in order to erase the traces are also clues. I will sort through these matters. First, I will cast a wide net. Then I will find important people and links to make breakthroughs. I won't be like a headless fly bumping around randomly. I won't let my emotions and delusions fly. Luo Nan spoke clearly and logically. His train of thought was clear and definite, but Rui Wen still noticed that he was flipping the pages of the notebook in his hand. But Luo Nan finally succeeded in changing the topic to this point. Come. Let's consider the problem of Luo Yuan and the large-scale fragment he occupies. In a certain sense, he and we are neighbors. He relies on the key and password my parents gave him. I believe that even if he studied and explored the mist maze many years earlier than us, his understanding of it is still not as profound as ours. Otherwise, this world wouldn't be what it is right now. Rui Wen went, Actually, she didn't quite understand. What was the difference between Luo Nan's this appearance and Luo Nan's that appearance? Would it make those mottled colors of life stay a little longer? Luo Nan chattered a few words. His mood seemed to have completely calmed down, and his tone became even more resolute. We definitely know more than Luo Yuan. If he wanted to pry into the core area, it would be very difficult to accurately aim without the external neuron. Without the soul cloak and the altar's spider web, he would not be able to withstand the impact of the torrent of information from the other side. He would not even have Luo Yuan. There's also the tree hole, the lens, and of course you Rui Wen. That's right. Because of you, not only did we understand the basic structure of the mist maze, but we also gained a preliminary understanding of its changes. If the core area really is as dangerous as we've observed, then I don't believe that Luo Yuan can occupy a sufficiently weighty base there. Therefore, his fragment can only be in the periphery. Luo Nan made an even clearer judgment. According to our observations, the fragments outside the core area are mostly fragmented, but we can't rule out exceptions. Perhaps they were bounced out due to some sort of impact or disturbance in the core area in the past. It's just like the fragments with potential that you predicted. The periphery fragment is quite concealed, and it can be manipulated by Luo Yuan. Its corresponding nature might be that it possesses considerable mobility. Extrapolating from the situation of the planar crossbow firing, this is a possibility. It's like a spaceship traveling through the mist maze. Yes, it's a large tree-hole space. Of course, it might be much more complex and complete. Luo Nan didn't even need to make inferences about what sort of use a fragment drifting outside the core area could achieve. Ruiwen could find dozens to hundreds of functions, and all of them were quite threatening. Luo Nan muttered to himself. I don't know if Luo Yuan possesses the knowledge to fully utilize the domain fragment's configuration, but it's never wrong to be a bit careful. If we build a pseudoplane in the future, we should start construction near the core area. It's relatively safe. Only then can the possibility of leakage be reduced to a minimum. We can kill it first. Ruiwen emphasized this opinion once more. From her perspective, this was already a very insistent attitude. Luo Nan waved his hand. I really want to kill it right now, but this isn't a question of whether I want to or not. There are all sorts of troublesome matters right now. It's not worth it to take the initiative to waste a large amount of energy for the sake of a character whose standpoint isn't particularly clear. And with the concealment of the fragment's influence, killing it in local space-time might not be a fatal blow. Even you, Ruiwen, would find it difficult to find that fellow in the misty maze. Am I right? Indeed, locking onto a target in a short period of time within the boundless and chaotic misty maze might be even more difficult than exploring the core area. However, she could work hard to do it. This was the most proactive and safest method. Even without mentioning the threat to the project, just the planar crossbow alone was one of the methods that could threaten Luo Nan's life the most. And in some special circumstances, the threat would be magnified by 10 times, 100 times. Luo Nan didn't know of Ruiwen's worries. He just followed his own train of thought upwards. So right now we're still waiting for that person to make a move. It doesn't matter if he makes a move against me, or if he makes a move against someone else. Every time he makes a move, information will be exposed. Once, twice, 3 times, 5 times. When that time comes, the difficulty of finding him will drop by several levels. What if he doesn't make a move from beginning to end? If he doesn't make a move, then he doesn't pose a threat. Why do we need to waste energy to kill him? Luo Nan felt himself to be extremely calm as he spoke to this point. His calm mind was even more active. He didn't just rely on passively taking a beating to find his train of thought. Thanks to you, Ruiwen, we have a partial understanding of the environment and changing trends of the misty maze. We have a better direction in our detection. Detection has always been our daily routine. Since this is the case, we should put this problem into our daily work to deal with. Luo Nan flipped through his notes, his train of thought becoming clearer and clearer. Since I have some memories and knowledge of the nature of the planar crossbow, as well as today's harvest, I might as well organize them a step further. I'll find a few key points to use as reference. Reference? Ruiwen was puzzled. What I'm saying is that we should write a program for these characteristics. We should also install a plugin for the tree hole and the lens. We should pay attention to gathering information in this aspect when we scan the misty maze. We can organize and analyze them later. It would be best if we can find a few high-priority suspicious points to compress his activity space. We should do our work in advance. It would be best if we can accomplish this. It's fine if he doesn't make a move, but if he does make a move, then don't give him the chance to make a move. Ruiwen thought for a moment and nodded in agreement. Luo Nan closed his notebook. Okay, let's go to the tree hole space. Let's ponder over how to extract the information from that fragment. Oh, but Ruiwen wanted to remind Luo Nan that it wasn't long until dinner time. But Luo Nan's mood clearly took a turn for the better at this time. Perhaps he was deliberately trying to mobilize her, even taking the initiative to propose. Come, Ruiwen. Let's have a race. Let's see who gets there first. Okay. I'll count. 3, 2, begin. Luo Nan's figure instantly disappeared. This was obviously a spatial shift, but he was unable to be like Ruiwen in the chaotic environment of the misty maze. It was impossible for him to be like Rue 1 and directly perform a resonant shuttle. The safest route was to first jump to the local spacetime. Then he would use the Luo clan's sandwich domain to perform a second jump. There was an extra step in the chain. It was clear that there was no chance of victory. Rue 1 even had the leisure to sigh. She erected a bridge amidst the gorgeous sea of flowers. Her body and soul blended together as she teleported in an instant. Luonan flashed inside a second after Rue 1 stepped into the gray and white monotonous tree hole space. Oh my. You lost again? Yep. What do you want? Big brother will buy it for you. Rue 1 finally had the chance to say those words. You said you were eating dinner at home. Is it time yet? Luonan looked at his watch, then he laughed. Not yet. There's still a bit of time. Let's first see if we can make an embryonic form of the plugin. Then it would really be a bit too much. Rue 1 was able to see the foreordained future. Right now, Luonan had finally succeeded in stirring up his emotions. He spoke faster. Aside from this plugin, I still need to properly research another. Look. Rue 1. This. Luonan drew in the air in the manner of presenting a treasure. The trajectory appeared to be chaotic, but Rue 1 was able to recognize that this should be a fragment of a configuration. However, its evolutionary trend would always be interrupted at inappropriate times. Clearly, its function wasn't perfect, but it seemed that there was an external interface. She couldn't make out any more information. She could only cast her gaze over and wait for Luonan's explanation. This is my big discovery today. It's in that health pod. According to what Luo Yuan said, this was left behind by my mother. I feel that he wouldn't lie about this sort of matter. Luonan drew this fragment once more. You should be able to see that this is a kind of configuration. It's incomplete, but it's the kind of incomplete that comes after being split apart. It should be used in some sort of relatively complete configuration system. Let's go with this for the time being. Rue 1 tilted her head slightly. It has a specific use? That's exactly what I mean. Luonan turned around and walked inside the tree hole. He spoke as he walked. I'm not sure for now, but I have a premonition that the message my mother left behind in this manner should be highly related to the research of the laboratory back then. Wasn't the tree hole one of the key points of their research back then? The 70-format laboratory, the pincer-shaped corridors, one on each side, all of them in the form of tree holes. The husband and wife also cooperated and competed. There's nothing more suitable than this. This is what Luo Yuan told me. Luonan spoke of the secret information he had heard in the 70-format laboratory back then with the soul-fostering horned demon. Rue 1 wasn't too clear on this. She just followed silently. The two soon arrived at the core region of the second floor of the tree hole. They arrived before the star atlas of the mist labyrinth displayed by the lens. Luonan didn't look at the star atlas. He just walked in circles around them. He even extended his hand to touch the inner wall of the special material and structure. I went to the remains of the tree holes on both sides of the corridors when I was in the laboratory. The damage was probably too severe, so I didn't discover them. However, if they really are related to the tree holes, believe it or not, my old man will certainly use them in the subsequent designs. Rue 1. So, I'm going to flip through the blueprints my old man left behind to see if there's a similar structure. Of course, there might be some deformations. Rue 1 thought for a bit. It'll take a lot of time. Yeah. Considering the factor of the deformations in the subsequent designs, I'll need to comb through everything anew. I'll need a bit more time. Why do I feel like everything is piled up together? Oh, now that I think about it, Luo Yuan taking the initiative to jump out has stirred the situation more and more complicated. This bunch of bastards. They can't be thinking of using fatigue tactics, right? Reality seemed to want to nail Luonan's judgment to the wall. He was destined to have a life of toil in recent times. It wasn't even until the morning of the next day. In the wee hours of the morning, Rue 1 was still in her own room, earnestly researching the future trends of the mist labyrinth. She was trying to find even more definite and valuable information within that splendid sea of flowers. Mo Peng, who lived downstairs, tiptoed up the stairs at this time to knock on Luonan's door. This action of his could not be hidden from anyone at all. Ru Awen was completely able to hear the true purpose of Mo Peng's visit in the middle of the night. Dang 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 dang. The 10 Days in the Wilderness expansion has been released. New plot, new system, new characters. Nanster, you said you'd take me flying. Perhaps from Mo Peng's perspective, this action of his was to help Luo Nan release the pressure. Ru Awen's foresight ability did not include the complex domain of social communication, so she was unable to comment. But in reality, it didn't take long for Ru Awen to hear Luo Nan's long sigh from within the room. Luo Nan's friend group on the Psychic Wave Network was suddenly flooded with large amounts of information at nearly the same time. The hexa-ear vibrated, and all sorts of notification sounds rang out in the air. Ru Awen was able to sort out the general thread of information very quickly, even though everyone's words were a bit emotional. Among the pile of information, 10 Days in the Wilderness hardcore fan Bamboo Pole's ridicule was the most representative. I didn't know that the brains of the game's designers and planners were deformed. It wasn't my fault. But when I saw the evolved skill tree, I didn't uninstall it. I even clicked on it. I watched helplessly as their brains spat shit out of their holes. It splashed all over my face. This is simply the stupidest thing I've ever done in my entire life. Bamboo Pole's words were summarized in a single sentence. 10 Days in the Wilderness, this multi-platform game that had just undergone a new version update, had a demonic moth appear. Chapter 1130. Time flew by amidst the sudden outbreak of chaos. In the blink of an eye, it was morning again. Monday mornings were always particularly busy. Many people needed to regain their rhythm. Ru Awen sat at the dining table for almost 5 minutes before Mo Peng, with a pair of panda eyes, yawned and sat next to her under Madame Luo Xuqing's kind care. His already round face was obviously swollen. When he looked at the neatly arranged plates and the dishes that were even more orderly and soulless, he suddenly lost his spirit. He slumped on the table and groaned. Why, old Mo? Where's my father? I urgently need a high-sugar, high-fat, high-protein diet. Madame Luo Xuqing replied with a smile. Your father only slept 3 more hours than you did. He left home at 4 in the morning, and is now working to support the family. Unlike a certain someone who wastes his time, money and life. Mo Peng tried to cover his ears with the table, but he could only block one side. Caught overnight? Emoya, who had to eat diet meals frequently due to the limitations of her industry, had a certain tolerance for the old Mo's environmentally friendly cuisine, of the household artificial intelligence, especially when there was someone to gloat over. I'm the victim. Mo Peng hit the table with half his face, but he said weakly, I really didn't want to stay overnight. It was Nanster who grabbed me and cleared the expansion in one night. He's biting the hand that feeds him. This kind of game should be slowly tasted and familiarized with the characters and data bit by bit. There's no experience in forcefully clearing the game. Emoya raised her eyebrows. What a surprisingly good reason to indulge. If I let myself go, I'll fall asleep in his bed, okay? I won't be forced to clear the game by him, and not even get a thank you in the end. Oh, how pitiful. It looks like I pulled you down too early. As Mo Peng's mother, Madame Luo Xuqing still knew her son. She didn't really think of her son as a hopeless degenerate. She was just puzzled. Nan isn't addicted to games? He's not playing games. Mo Peng had no appetite and only wanted to express himself. Who plays games in the work area, takes notes, checks data, and holds conference calls? He's not even that serious when writing a thesis. 10 Days in the Wilderness. If I touch it again in 10 days, I'll chop off my hand. Sure, I'll buy some pork trotters for you in advance. Emoya saw through Mo Peng's words with a glance. Then, she turned her gaze to the other side. 10 Days in the Wilderness. Ru Awen, did you know? What happened? Ru Awen thought it over very seriously, but it was truly rather difficult to describe the situation in concise terms. The sound of hurried footsteps rang out at this time. Luo Nan scuttled down the stairs. He didn't even stop by the dining table. He just hurried over and said, I'm going out. Luo Xuqing raised her voice. You're not eating. There's a meeting over there. Let's all go together. We won't starve. With that he disappeared. Around the table, apart from Rue 1, the other three were all sighing, although their hearts were subtly different. Emoya continued asking, "Is there a problem with the new expansion pack?" Rue 1 recalled the information she had received last night and nodded silently. As for what the problem was, she still couldn't say for the time being. Emoya kicked her brother with her long legs. "Hey, you've been playing all night. Other than the dark circles under your eyes, don't you have any useful information?" "I do have information, but I don't dare to ask if it's correct or not." Emopeng grunted twice, but he still struggled to get up under the gazes of his mother and sister. He did his best to recall. First of all, it's definitely the game settings. The new expansion pack released an entire series of heroes, as well as the corresponding evolutionary tree. It's related to controllable mutant new humans. This smell is a bit off when I carefully touch it. Breakfast had turned into a seminar at the last minute. Undoubtedly, it greatly affected the proper schedule. But of course, it was impossible to come up with an effective judgment and opinion in this sort of environment, let alone a feasible plan. In the end, everyone could only go to work and school. Today, it was Emoya's turn to send Rue 1 to school. Monday's especially congested traffic made it impossible to have a lightning-fast experience, even if one sat in Emoya's red supercar. From Rue 1's perspective, this was undoubtedly an extremely inefficient action. But it was also an effort to extend the vividness of color. She didn't have any clear thoughts of rejecting color itself. But by choosing this method, the time spent researching the misty labyrinth and chaotic sea of flowers would inevitably be allocated to the city's traffic layer and the high-rise skyscrapers. It would be equally chaotic, but it would quickly turn gray matter and turn chaotic in the real world. Rue 1 knew that what she saw was only the current conditions and the foundation of the known information. It was a process of rolling forward all the way to the end. In theory, every second would change, and every second could bring about entirely different results. But the reality was that the trend would never change even after watching 1,000 times. As for the details, those fleeting details were admittedly brilliant purple and brilliant red. But if one truly studied them in earnest, one would inevitably have a sort of meaningless doubt or self-awareness. Well, Rue 1 wasn't too clear on what meaning was. But she had lived by Luo Nan's side for a long time. She had experienced the troubles that plagued Luo Nan at all times. It was as if an invisible whip was lashing him forward. She couldn't help but feel that wasting time like this was definitely wrong. The problem was that Luo Nan himself was currently in the same situation. From Rue 1's point of view, Luo Nan had similarly invested his limited energy into the details of the endless appearance, the branching, and the rapid decay into chaos. Perhaps this wasn't his original intention, but in this complex and confusing real world, there would always be factors like this and that would affect him. For example, the sudden game expansion pack event. Actually, Rue 1 didn't really understand why Luo Nan cared so much about this matter. She couldn't judge whether or not Luo Nan's methods were correct. This was because she couldn't eliminate the possibility of the tributary eventually becoming the mainstream, even though it would ultimately return to deathly stillness. Rue 1 was confused, but the only target she was willing to use as a reference in most situations was Luo Nan. She hoped to be able to understand and imitate this pattern. Perhaps this would help her create a greater separation from the long river of deathly stillness. She wouldn't fuse with it too early and sink into the endless chaos. Rue 1 instinctively didn't wish for this to happen. Even though she couldn't find a clear dividing line right now. She couldn't tell if she was detached from the outside, or if she herself was a part of this long river of deathly stillness. Was she observing the final destination of all things, or was it the occasional surging waves of the river intertwining with the real world and separating from it? Rue 1 looked out the window, but she saw her own reflection in the glass. In the environment where the light inside and outside collided and flowed, and in the blurry mirror carrier, the image on it seemed to be wriggling and changing, as if it would peel off the shell at any time and jump out of it completely different. Her fingers touched the window as well as the shadow. The point of contact was slightly cold, just like the water vapor of the long, dead river, gently biting her fingertips. However, Was she above or below the water? Aside from Luo Nan, Emoya was the person in the family who was the most familiar with Rui 1. It was also because they were familiar with each other that they didn't intentionally disturb each other in this silent atmosphere. Most of the time, it was quiet in the car. Emoya was also handling some of her own affairs during the autopilot period. She only spoke when they were about to reach the school. Look at how flustered Luo Nan has been these past few days. Don't add to his troubles in other areas. Rui 1 looked away from her own mirror and turned to look at her. I'm talking about those messy matters on the internet. Cut them off when it's time. I'll talk to the company and BHD. If you run into those paparazzi or gossipy women at school, hide if you can. Strive to cool things down in these 2 days. Rui 1 pondered seriously for a moment. I'll just skip class. Then am I an accomplice or the main culprit? Rui 1 still lacked this sort of sensitivity. She didn't respond at all to Emoya's teasing. Her eyes drooped in silence, but her mind began to plan the goal of today's exploration. Emoya rolled her eyes. In the end, she didn't say anything. The car smoothly arrived at the school 5 minutes later. Sure enough, Rui 1 didn't go to the main campus after saying goodbye to Emoya. She directly boarded the self-moving conveyor belt and headed in the direction of the Northern Shore jungle. Actually, Rui 1 wanted to directly teleport to Gear's underground laboratory. However, she had truly become famous during this period of time. There were people staring at her practically every second she walked on campus. It was extremely difficult to find a suitable visual and psychological blind spot in this sort of environment. She could only spend a bit more time like a normal student. She transferred from the self-moving conveyor belt to the school's tram, until she reached the outskirts of the Northern Shore jungle. But at this time, a normal student's direction of activity was certainly the opposite of hers. Rui 1 ignored the strange gazes she received along the way. She prepared to enter deep into the jungle, and directly jumped to the laboratory when the time came. A loudspeaker sounded from behind her at this time. Hey Luo Xiang. Junior sister Rui 1. The person in front of her first said Rui 1's registered name at school, but he felt that it was too unfamiliar. He imitated Luo Nan's usual way of addressing her, using a more intimate form of address. The problem was that Rui 1 didn't turn her head at all. It was as if she didn't hear his greeting at all. She directly walked across the long river that cut through the forest, connecting the southern shore and the northern shore with the Nine-Bend Bridge. The person behind her jumped off the sightseeing car and hurried 2 steps forward. His mouth didn't stop. Do you recognize me? I'm au Quebec. We've met before. Rui 1 didn't remember. She continued to walk forward, and the fellow called OK kept up with her. He chattered endlessly next to her ear. Rui 1, aren't you going to class at this time? Even though your behavior isn't too good, it's quite interesting when you do it. One of the most valuable things about the mystic arts is that it's interesting. Plus, you're quite mysterious. Rui 1 followed Emoya's teachings and maintained silence in front of the gossipy woman. But OK didn't have the slightest intention of restraining himself. You want to go to Gear? Have you eaten breakfast yet? The water chestnut cakes here are surprisingly authentic. I'll treat you. Oh my. OK subconsciously cried out. The reason was because he had just crossed the Nine-Bend Bridge and stepped onto the northern shore paved with gravel and grass. There was a brown shadow that passed through the morning grass and trees that were still a bit damp. The brown shadow pierced out from the side and charged straight at him. OK nearly kicked it out. Luckily, he was able to see clearly who it was in the end. He staggered and stopped, but the fat and round fellow took over his position. He was no longer able to walk side by side with Rui 1. The fellow that leapt out clearly occupied a good position, but he didn't dare to rub against Rui 1's body. He just excitedly spun in circles beneath her feet. His long tail whipped against the mud, rocks and grass, making popping sounds. This was, without a doubt, Jerry. OK often saw him in the society. He knew that he was Xie Juanping's adopted son, one of the group favorites in Luo Nan's circle of friends. He would drill in and out of the bosom of Luo Nan's extremely beautiful friends of the opposite sex, including Rui 1. But what OK didn't know was that this little thing looked like a common muskrat in the jungle swamp area. In fact, it had a mysterious and complicated history. From what he knew so far, it had once undergone precise modifications by Luo Zhongheng. It had stored a large amount of critical information. Normally, it would do some cleaning work in the tree hole of the withered tree sandbar. It could be said that it was precisely because of Jerry's existence that the letter Luo Zhongheng left for Luo Nan, the building structure of the tree hole, and other information were perfectly preserved. Ever since that matter, this muskrat's position in Luo Nan's heart had changed. But Rui Wen, who was the first to introduce Jerry to Luo Nan, still had the same attitude towards this little thing. She didn't stop walking, and Jerry followed by her side in a well-behaved manner. Its fat body achieved a perfect blocking position within the narrow jungle path. It made it impossible for OK to walk side by side with Rui when no matter what. OK could only fall behind by a body's length. He raised his voice and did his best to strike up a conversation with Rui Wen. Speaking of which, you're not wasting your energy on your schoolwork. Are you really preparing to debut? Even though Mingtang culture's hype isn't that brilliant, I still believe in you. A girl with such boldness like yours will succeed in any field. In the entertainment circle, more people will be able to see and appreciate your beauty. That kind of boldness and mysterious beauty. When the time comes, I'll definitely be a fan of you. Yep. Actually, I'm a fan right now. OK didn't hesitate to use overflowing words of praise. He clearly expressed his family's attitude, but Rui Wen still didn't pay attention to him. OK furrowed his brows a bit, but he soon calmed down. This was how cool it was. Only a girl could enter his discerning eyes, right? Just like this, the two of them arrived at Gear. There weren't many people in Gear at this time. Some of them were freaks who were doing some inexplicable mysticism experiments and had forgotten the time. They simply stayed the night here. There were also some fellows who felt that the coffee and pastries here were delicious. They came to freeload for breakfast and enjoy the club's benefits. At times like this, bringing a female companion or something was the best atmosphere. But no matter which type it was, they weren't the same type as those little fellows from the South Bank who were in a hurry. Freedom to use their time freely and leisurely enjoy life was a right that only the seniors of the university department had. At this side of the entrance hall, the club's famous gossip lord Chao Shanhai belonged to the category of freeloading for breakfast and picking up girls. In the crook of his arm hung a pretty junior sister. At times like this, encountering an acquaintance was a sure way to show off. Chao Shanhai was in the elevator lobby on the first floor. He pulled over a few friends and discussed going to the casual booth to drink coffee and chat. At this time, he saw Rui Wen and OK walk in. Here, Rui Wen's direction was correct. Her age was even more out of place. Not to mention, she had the club's vice president by her side. Holy crap! Chao Shanhai's eyelids twitched a few times when he saw Rui Wen. He subconsciously averted his gaze and couldn't help but think of Rui Wen's older brother, Luo Nan, who had given him several months of nightmares. At the end of last year, he had suffered quite a few losses at Luo Nan's hands because of his big mouth. Especially at the grand banquet. Tears and snot streamed down his face as he sat on the ground and begged for mercy. He even sold out his old friend Huang Bingjin in passing. It could be said that he had lost all face. He certainly hated Luo Nan from the bottom of his heart, but as for revenge, screw it. Back then Luo Nan's assistant, dragging him by the neck on the ground, had the rank of captain. Not to mention that after the incident, he and the elders of his family had been specially taken care of by the big shots. Revenge against a fellow with this kind of background? What was he going to do with his head? Chao Shanhai's momentum was seized, but his mouth was always ahead of his brain. He bypassed Rui Wen and said something else. OK's taste changes quite quickly. Everyone in the circle of the Divine Research Society knew that Vice President OK was a standard age control. Whether it was the president, Tang Yi, or the beautiful agent, Fei Jin, who had taken a leave of absence from school due to illness, they were all his favorites. And this young man, who still had some time left in his freshman career, had never denied this point. He constantly used his status and resources as vice president to create opportunities for himself and create public opinion. The results were not to be discussed, but this persona was established. But today's scene. The circle of people looked at Quebec. He had already entered the elevator with Rue 1, but he retreated with his hands raised when the alarm went off. This elevator was installed later on. It directly connected to Luo Nan's underground laboratory. OK really didn't have the authority. In comparison, the muskrat wagging its head and wagging its tail was more impressive than Quebec. The people standing here with Chao Shanhai were all people of the same circle. They all more or less had some family privileges. But it was hard for them to not feel a bit sour when they saw this scene. There was also a person who had a good relationship with Quebec. He teased him from afar. Vice President O, have you taken a fancy to this person? Or have you taken a fancy to this person's sister or aunt? You should greet everyone in advance. OK turned around. He wasn't angry at all. His doll-like face was full of smiles as he shook his head. Ambition doesn't depend on age. Boldness. Boldness. Do you guys understand? Huh. You guys haven't seen Rue Wen's video? The one that came out of the elevator. That expression in her eyes wasn't an act. It wasn't an act. It was completely natural. Her charm was limitless. In comparison, she OK spoke to this point and saw that there were girls here. He chuckled and bypassed the comparison. He rubbed his hands. Besides, my emotions are very pure. I've decided to start as a fan. I'll first establish a support group and a club. I'll watch Rue Wen grow up step by step. The few men who were familiar with OK were obviously still laughing and joking when they saw him like this. The junior sister who was holding Chao Shanhai's arm had just figured out the situation. She asked quietly, "That's the demon eye girl." "Yeah, you don't know?" The junior sister curled her lips. "She's not a big star. Does everyone have to remember her?" Chao Shanhai smelled jealousy. He grinned and elbowed her lightly. Yes. She's definitely not as big as you." The junior sister patted his shoulder reproachfully. She then recalled Rue Wen's slender and straight figure and laughed out loud. She moved closer to Chao Shanhai's ear and said, "Fortunately, she's wearing a dress. But it shouldn't be bad to change it. Are you sure you didn't get the wrong gender? This kind of thing is very popular now." Chao Shanhai rolled his eyes and slapped the junior sister to make her shut up. He didn't want to offend OK because of a woman's jealousy. Most importantly, he absolutely couldn't offend Rue Wen and the person behind her. The problem was that his attitude wasn't firm enough. The junior sister's train of thought was a little off. "That's right. Look at this. Luna just changed the desktop. Isn't it super cool? But I heard it's a woman." Chao Shanhai didn't have the leisure to look at the shared resources between the girls. But when the projection area was turned on, he still had to politely glance at it. Then he couldn't pull it out. At this time, the junior sister also made a sound of surprise. She discovered new information from the desktop picture. This person, she raised her head to look at the elevator door. Apart from the metal door, she obviously couldn't see anything else. But Chao Shanhai could clearly see it from the projection area. The figure that took up 2/3 of the picture seemed to be a boxer by profession. He was bare-chested, revealing the lean, hard and smooth lines of muscles. He raised his forearms and clenched his fists, assuming a defensive stance in combat techniques. This stance covered most of the person's face, but the half that was exposed was really delicate and pretty. Moreover, he wasn't old and still had a childish air to him. Of course, what left the deepest impression was that cold and gloomy eyes that seemed to be able to absorb and gather light. They gave this flat picture a vivid and vigorous feeling of power. It was as if in the next moment, he would quickly and violently throw a punch and directly attack a powerful enemy. Just as OK had said, "Courage." The corner of Chao Shanhai's mouth twitched. His eyes also half squinted. He subconsciously bypassed the lines of the upper body and focused on the head area. He began to evaluate. If the person in the picture had hair a little longer, cheeks a little more plumpness, and wore Acumen School's uniform, then, holy shit. It was also at this time that OK's line of sight shifted and circled around the palm-sized projection area. In the next second, his entire body was sucked in and he cried out involuntarily, "Rue Wen!" Chao Shanhai shuddered involuntarily. Chapter 1131. In the conference room of the Shangding building, the atmosphere was strange and depressing, although it had nothing to do with silence. The entire room was covered in light and shadows radiating from the game interface, and there were almost realistic sound effects lingering in the ears of every participant. Some people were playing in the conference room, some were watching, some were paying attention to online public opinion, some were doing data analysis, and some were joining in through the long-distance communication network. Each of them had their own duties, and there were occasional exchanges, but they were basically stuck at the technical level. No one made a conclusive conclusion. This was because the one who determined the nature of the incident had been silent for too long. Luonan crossed his arms over his chest as he stood at the side of the long conference table. He leaned against the windowsill, his gaze a bit erratic. Sometimes his eyes wandered around the game interface, and other times he glanced at the familiar faces in the conference room. But most of the time, his gaze passed through the glass window and looked outside. It was common knowledge that the Xia City branch of the Ability User Society was located in the Shangding building. The floor was low, and the lighting was terrible. There was no view to speak of. But Luonan seemed to want to escape from the shadowy area that was already completely covered by the enormous building. Look at this flower. As the convener and host of the meeting, he had been silent for too long, causing the function of the meeting itself to be eliminated. Fortunately, the people in the conference room were either acquaintances or professionals hired by the foundation under his name. With the help of Bamboo Pole, a temporary secretary who was skilled and understanding, he was able to start the more practical technical analysis work. No matter what, it was better to collect as much information as possible. Although no one knew if the information would be useful in the end, Bamboo Pole circled around the conference room. In the end, he circled back to Luonan. "What are you looking at?" Luonan shook his head. "I didn't see anything. I was just thinking about something." "All right then, what are you thinking about?" "Wishful thinking. This is not something a leader should say." Bamboo Pole grinned and lowered his voice. "Speaking of which, this meeting was a little rushed. We didn't prepare enough and didn't control the number of people. We shouldn't have met the new employee at this time. I was so angry that I became muddled. Wasn't I the one who suggested it? After all, this matter was directly related to the foundation, and had little to do with the branch for the time being. Besides, I think it's quite valuable for reference." Luonan's gaze streaked across the faces of everyone in the conference room once more. His voice became a bit lower. "At the very least, I can see what sort of attitude normal people have towards this matter. This includes their views towards us. How much they disapprove of us." "Hey boss, if you say that, I'm afraid you won't be able to hold on for long. Thanks for the reminder." The boss and the temporary secretary looked at each other and smiled bitterly. The current situation was that the producers had injected distortion, evolution, Homo evolutus, and other sensitive elements into the new data for 10 days in the wilderness. They had also created an extremely complete system for them. Currently, the world's strongest group of people were engaged in a complex game around the relevant elements, and many large cities around the world were experiencing uncontrollable aberrant infections. It had to be said that 10 days in the wilderness, a large-scale production that could be called a game for all citizens, revealed such content. It had to be said that it was really two-directional. However, most people did not care about such things. This was because most of the changes in this world had long existed in people's endless fantasies. Especially since the era of distortion, these elements mentioned above were common in all kinds of creations, and could not be considered extraordinary. This was especially true for gamers. They only cared about the quality of the game, and the internal logic of the updated content. It would have been fine if the game was really terrible, but the quality of this new content was quite outstanding. The graphics and playability were both extremely strong, and there were no obvious logic bugs in the content. It was extremely attractive. Therefore, gamers had every reason to throw themselves into the game. They could swim freely within the large amount of content provided by the game. They could call friends, play online, or pursue achievements and trophies one after another. This was a very natural process. It was in line with normal human psychology. However, Luonan and the others wanted to go against the flow. They wanted to dig deep into the background of the game's data and malice. According to Bamboo Pole's words, it's super boring. The experience is extremely bad. I feel like I'm a moralist and a political animal that's been mutated. This is the kind of trash I used to spew. However, Luonan and the people around him stood at the forefront of the surging tides of this era. They possessed a clear and distinct standpoint. They had to accept it, and they had already realized the mutation. At the very least, they had to understand how to translate it. They had to do their utmost to allow more people who were not too sensitive to understand the meaning within. It was mentally taxing. It was tedious and uninteresting. It was completely predictable. This was a thankless task. Luonan changed the topic. How's the response right now? Bamboo Pole smirked. Just from a business point of view, the 3 years of sharpening a sword expansion is obviously a great success. The daily activity data on the official website isn't much of an exaggeration. As for Xia City, all the flagship stores are full. This is a working day. The evening rush hour hasn't arrived yet. Reservations are already booked all the way until the weekend. What about public opinion? Right now, most people are discussing the matter as it stands. There are also people who nitpick, but people like us are loathsome. We are moralists who throw hats at the drop of a hat. We don't have much of a climate right now. Do you want to stir up a topic? Can we? It should be fine in Xia City. After all, it involves the problem of mutation. Everyone is quite sensitive about it recently. The surrounding areas are fine. But when we get to Spring City, it's basically... You understand. Luonan let out a breath. Go west, go north, and even across the ocean. There's basically no hope. Public opinion is very complicated. The hearts of people are even more so. Perhaps we'll be so tired that we vomit blood that will have the opposite effect. But if we don't do anything and wake up, we'll discover that the entire world is our ally. Well, everything is possible in dreams. Luonan shook his head. It should be said that there are people who are even more skilled at doing things in everyone's dreams. Bamboo Pole was a bit startled. Then he shook his head. I'm more concerned about the standpoint of certain people than the influence of public opinion. The release of the expansion pack this time, for us who are in the aberration disposal faction, will highlight that we have bad intentions. It's not strange for the investors to do this. They're also experts at doing this. But the military is still considered a partner. They're letting them toss and turn like this. I'm worried that the various factions within the military have reached some sort of consensus. Yes, it's a temporary compromise. The power of inertia is quite strong. Luonan didn't respond to this topic. He looked to be a bit lost in thought. Instead, Inlu, who was participating in the conference through long-distance communication, took the initiative to join the discussion. Mr. Bamboo Pole, according to our intelligence, the military doesn't have a clear attitude. Perhaps it can be said that the investors are taking advantage of the unclear opinion environment within the military to complete this probing jab. After all, it's only the public beta testing phase right now. There's too much leeway to maneuver. No, it's not a probe. Luonan's gaze turned to look outside the window. His gaze was still erratic, but his tone had never been this certain since the start of the conference. This is an official method. There's nothing more official than this. Inla didn't dare to say anything more. Bamboo Pole spoke in a probing manner. It seems that this kind of interference and pressure isn't much for the work of the global census. It's not interference, nor is it pressure. It's a scramble. Huh. Luonan pointed at his own head. Scramble to land on the beach ahead of time. Occupy the high ground. This is to pave the way for the mutant new humans. Bamboo Pole locked gazes with Inlu, who was thousands of miles away. Bamboo Pole asked, "Are you talking about the environment of public opinion?" "No, it's the solution." Luonan extended his hand and tapped on the nearby AR image. Right now, the employee in charge of conducting the game test had just completed a mission and obtained skill points. He was preparing to climb the evolution tree, but he was a bit hesitant. Luonan reminded him, Do brainless gene cultivation in the internal cultivation stage. Don't be in a rush to take shape. First accumulate enough points in the petri dish. The employee went over and over again, but he still did as his new boss said. Luonan turned around to face Bamboo Pole and Yin Le. He grinned. I think this will work. It's not just in the game. His wristband vibrated before he could finish speaking. He looked at the caller ID and ignored the confused Bamboo Pole and Yin Le for the time being. He picked up the phone. Brother Ping, what's up? Xie Juanping's voice came from the other side. Nanster, did you get into a conflict with that baby okay again in the past 2 days? Oh. Luonan didn't react in time. It's that vice president of the Divine Research Society. The baby-faced guy who nearly burned down Withered Tree Sandbar last year. Luonan went twice. He finally recalled a bit of his memories and denied. No, I haven't seen him in this period of time. Then that's strange. This kid called me in such a hurry to get your contact information. I asked him what he wanted, but he didn't say. Speaking of which, you've really been protected by mysteries lately. Your contact number is completely confidential. People who want to find you can't find you, but people who want to give you trouble can be found. Xie Junping was ridiculing the so-called high-privilege group treatment that Xia City gave Luonan. The recent incident related to Rui caused the issue of Luonan and his family's information security to once again be placed on the table. Luonan was quite open-minded. As long as someone deliberately wants to do something bad, those treatments are equivalent to nothing. Of course, our cooperation is quite low. We don't have bodyguards or anything like that. After all, Luonan wasn't a protected person. He didn't need the protection of the government. His opponents and enemies far exceeded the level that society's privileges could restrain. He wasn't the government's son, nor did he make any indelible contributions to the government. It was unrealistic to expect the government to take out large amounts of public power and resources to protect them airtight. In most cases, this kind of treatment only existed as a layer of warning for the family. In case his aunt and uncle, Emoya, and Mo Peng encountered danger, Luonan would have time to react. Xie Junping grunted twice. You're quite open-minded. I still have a meeting. If there's nothing else, I'll give your contact information to that kid. Sure. Less than half a minute after the call ended, he received a call from an unknown number. Luonan's wristband displayed the words "no risk" at this time. Luonan laughed and picked up the call. Just as he said hello, the person on the other end yelled, "Are your marketing team full of pigs? This hype is 2F** King Shameless." You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.